December 11th, I call the Scituate Planning Board meeting to order. Need a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is continuation of the public hearing for the definitive subdivision plan for 50 Country Way, as well as any public hearing for the next use special permit in the Village Business Overlay District. Gentlemen, why don't we talk about what's transpired since we met last? We'll talk to John, we'll talk to Laura, and then we'll talk with the board.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Greg Morse, Morse Engineering, representing Chris Ford, the property owner, and Steve Gard, his attorney, is with us as well. Since the last time we met, we submitted a revised plan addressing the outstanding comments in John's previous letter, and we have made the detailed edits to the plan that the DPW was looking for. I think you recall that they submitted a last-minute comment letter at our last meeting. So we made those detail edits to the construction details, and we've submitted a copy of the plan for the fire chief to comment on the hydrant location and the waiver we're asking for with respect to the right-of-way radii out at the intersection of Country Way into the proposed site. I have not heard back from the fire chief on his acceptance of the hydrant location, which is at the end of the cul-de-sac at the intersections of lots 1 and 2, or with respect to the radii. We provided Morning Glories with proposed conditions of use with regards to this project and the special permit project. We have not received any written correspondence from Morning Glories. We have asked them several times for written correspondence. I would note that they have not been in objection to anything. They have not shown up at any of the meetings in objection to any of the current plans. We received your general requirements and draft conditions of approval. We've reviewed those thoroughly. I don't believe that we have any requested changes on those for this project. We just received John's latest letter yesterday, or the day before, December 16th. Couple of small outstanding items. It looks like, for the most part, those have been incorporated into the draft conditions, that they would be changed between now and endorsement of a Mylar plan. I don't think there are any significant plan changes to be made at this point to this plan. That's where we stand.
Okay. John?
Yeah, I think, obviously we know this is not something that is likely to be built, but I got to look at it as if it could be. So I think the issues I see, just to summarize, would be, we had a discussion on this, the redevelopment provisions relative to those leaching pits in the front. Now, the way the town reg reads, it probably would be a redevelopment under the local regulations, and it's not in a buffer zone, but under DEP regulations, which are sort of referenced to other sections of the bylaw. Based on my discussion with, not on this project, but on other projects, Tom McGuire, who's the DEP guy that's sort of the guru for this stuff, what he told me relative to a partial redevelopment, which this would be, it clearly is not a full redevelopment because there's an increase in impervious area over what's there today, that any area that's currently not impervious, either roof, driveway, whatever, doesn't fall under that partial category. So they would, so in my opinion, they would need a waiver from that. And I read, Greg's write-up, and prior to my discussion with Tom McGuire, I probably would have agreed with him. But after talking to him, I kind of have to stick with what the guy at DEP says. So that would be, I would think you need a waiver for it.
So in other words, it's Greg's outlined in his letter, it's basically two options. One is to come back up and declare it as redevelopment, or come back up and grant a request for a waiver.
Right. In my opinion, I think they should get the, obviously get the waiver. That's up to the board to decide, but they should request the waiver based on my understanding of the rules.
Okay. The rest of your concerns have been addressed?
There are a few other things that I would say you probably could condition. The erosion control plan, there aren't sizes for temporary basins, et cetera, but that could be a condition of a SWIP that they would need to do to implement this plan. It's got an open basin, and an open basin should have a stabilized overflow spillway. It doesn't have that. It's not a big deal to design one. It's sort of been cut, but there should still be one. There's no real outlet, but typically you provide some means to pump, you know, if you look at the DEP requirements for an infiltration basin, there's an outlet structure with sort of a low-level drain that you can pump it out if it clogs. Again, it's just lines on paper at this point, but I think that's something they might, you know, want to do. There's a couple other, I think there's another waiver or two in here that they should look at that were listed on, let me just go, there was a list on their plan, and then there was voted waivers that you granted on, that I looked at the minutes of the meeting. I'm not sure if the minutes were approved, so maybe there were some changes, but when I looked through, there were a couple on their plan that weren't voted. And you could go back through and double check that
Okay.
to see.
Yeah, I thought we caught up with them all, but.
Well, there's the radius one for one, but there was a couple other, in the minutes, didn't show up either. I think I'd have to look through my letter specifically at which ones they were, but if you look at the plan versus the minutes, I think you'll see them out. Greg, do you remember which ones they were? Because you might have looked at that too. Or do you have the minutes to check?
I got a copy of the minutes, or the draft minutes from Karen, and it looks like 12 waivers were voted. There are 14 on the plan set.
So there were two. There was the radius, and I think the other one might have been the alignments offset.
The alignment looks like it was voted, that was waiver 2 that was voted in.
Yep.
Friday, let's see, waiver voted to waive the requirement for curb radii at the intersection of the proposed road pending approval of the fire chief. That was approved, the radius points, based on these minutes.
Oh, did you vote the waiver on the lot development?
Let's see.
That I don't remember.
On the lot development?
They didn't show lot development on the plans, which is required. Ask for a waiver. I'm not sure that might be the other waiver that wasn't voted.
Yeah, so waiver number 13, it was to waive the requirement for stormwater calculations to assume the lots to be fully developed. It says stormwater calculations for the individual lots would be provided prior to lot development. What we showed on the plan was your subdivision rules and regulations require that you show development on the lots. Unfortunately, we don't know what the development on these lots is going to be. We showed a conceptual layout, we showed a single-family home on one of the lots, we showed an office building with a parking lot on one of the lots, but without having the exact footprints, without knowing what use is going in here. This is in the general business zoning district, so you have a plethora of different uses that could go in. Any development on the lots would also have to come in front of you again for a site plan approval. So we did not include a full build-out. We provided a schematic of what could be done.
So yeah, the calculations assumed not built lots,
Yep.
which the subdivision regs require that they be assumed to be built. So that would be a waiver that you, or, I mean, I would assume you'd want to condition it so that, because one of them was a single family, which wouldn't necessarily come back as a site plan, I don't think.
That's right.
So,
You probably take care of the drainage review during the site plan review for the office building or any commercial building over there.
right, but not for the lot, right, for the single family house lot.
Not for the single family house.
So you might want to condition that if they do come back, not that they would, but if they ever did come back with a single family house, you'd have to incorporate that into the drainage, because it's not right now.
Yeah.
If you waive it, you could
Yeah.
condition it as such, so that you protect.
How's the drainage, how would that change the calculations? More impervious?
No, more impervious area, right?
Yeah, I think we would have to add something.
Yeah, if you waive it, you might want to condition it in that manner. I had a couple of issues with some of the drainage calcs as far as the existing leaching pits, also as far as their volume under the proposed case, because they are raising them up. And it was assumed that it would be a pit with stone all the way up. And I don't think that would be the case, because you'd have a cover in the top, so you'd lose some. It's a little, so it's tight to get the thing to fit, frankly, with water going to it, but.
I think the reality is that for all the time and effort we spent on it, we'll never see the light of day.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I just gotta look at it as if it were,
No, I
so, you know,
understand,
maybe
but
you
you've
just
got
say
it.
it,
So do we.
you know.
Yeah, we've got to do the same thing, except that we can, yeah, so. Laura?
Um, I think we've covered a lot of ground between the last meeting and this meeting. Although we never really got anything definitive from Morning Glories, some conditions were worked out that I think should address anything that could possibly impact them. And there are a couple of things that could impact them. During construction, there's a condition that the access road must remain open, that the property line be flagged, so it's really clear where their property is, where the applicant's property is, that any construction in the easement, they have to be notified of. For instance, there is a vertical granite curb that's going to be going into the easement. It's about 130 feet of vertical granite curb. It's, you know, not a small amount. And in addition to being notified, they have to provide documentation that that's acceptable to them. So, you know, hopefully that's something that could be done easily, but that's required before the pre-construction conference. So I think there are a number of good controls that are built into the decision. The plan anticipates having two different kinds of uses, an office building and a single-family house. It could be, you know, two single-family houses. You know, I think there's a kind of open-endedness to this, but one of the conditions has to do with a requirement for screening for the single-family house because it is in a business district. So that's part of the zoning bylaw already, but it's the kind of thing that you tend to kind of flip past in the book if you're not looking for it. So that's good. And there were a number of small items that John brought up, some of them probably not really so small, but those are, would be required to be added to the plan before endorsement. The TSS removal that John was talking about with regards to the redevelopment definition, that is recommended that you vote a waiver for that just in case it turns out later on down the road sometime that it's needed. They do have some mitigation for the stormwater in the Zone A. You know, they're generally trying to get the stormwater out of the Zone A and I think reduce the amount of impervious surface in the Zone A to as little as possible. The way the DEP standard is written, it talks about doing what's practicable to the extent possible, but it kind of isn't very absolute the way it's written. So I think the waiver is a good idea. It's not really clear exactly what's required, but you know, just to cover all the bases, I think the waiver is a good thing to do. I think that's about it. And we have a draft decision. I think those were in your packets. It's kind of a lengthy thing.
But it doesn't cover all the new waivers that we just discussed, obviously, right?
It covers all of them except for, I think we have in there somewhere that there's a requirement for a site plan for the office building that would include drainage calculations, and we probably also need to say that before construction of a single-family home, there would also need to be a separate stormwater permit for that. So the drainage would be reviewed for that.
Okay. Questions, comments from the board? Are we, is the board in concurrence with the waiving as opposed to coming back up and declaring it otherwise for the drainage?
Yeah, as long as we feel comfortable in that we're protected or the town is protected. But it sounds like it is.
If this were actually to go through and get built the way it's drawn right now, are we in danger of impacting the water supply? I guess that's the bottom line. We know that's not going to happen, but as John says, we've got to sort of act as though it might.
Well, I guess you could put something a little bit tighter in there if you wanted to get, you know, something, I don't know if you can get anything in writing from DEP that this is acceptable, or what it is. I mean, the DEP language is not very black and white, so I don't think they're gonna see a need to do something like that.
Didn't the WRC determine that there would be no impact on the water supply?
They did review it, they didn't seem to have a problem with it. Greg was there, you were there, I was there. They seemed to be,
That was a good presentation and I think good
Yeah, I
discussion.
think that's kind of a key issue. I mean, that's what I wanted to bring back up.
But I don't have the letter in front of me, but I thought, my understanding was, at least through the discussion, and keep me relatively honest, Greg, that they didn't, I think it was, determination was that there would not have a negative impact on the water supply.
Right, we basically presented them a couple of different options on what to do, and this option here, it maintains what the existing impervious surface is that's tributary to those leach and catch basins. So it's the same impervious surface that's running to it. Furthermore, we're adding deep sunk-coated catch basins in a particle separator, so you can claim that the water quality is better. I think that was their determination. This was the best feasible alternative that we presented.
I don't recall how much that to define, but that's my recollection of the conversation. I think it was in one of the attachments that Karen sent out to us.
Yeah, I remember reading it, but I don't remember, like you said, any negativity.
Well, John sent over comments on December 4th, which Greg replied to, right?
This would have been,
This
It's
would
in the
have been a
packet,
long
it was in the
time. Yeah.
packet.
Yeah,
It was
these
in the
these
packet.
were the only, as I remember, the only sort of
Electronically.
additional issues, right?
well, there were some concerns about the water quality, I think, quite a while ago. And
Well, that's
that's
back
why
in
there
June,
was a
though.
meeting with the water.
But June is when they met.
Resource Committee.
Right. I think it goes back.
Yeah, I think it was quite a while ago. And I
Yeah,
think when they realized that
June
the,
26th.
I think when they realized that the water quality was actually going to be improved by this over what's there now, I think they found this acceptable.
Yeah, they endorsed the tree boxes. Right? And they wanted the owner of Morning Glories to provide the applicant access to the property to maintain the leaching field and all of that. But, you know, they were okay with it going forward. So the only other thing I saw was the last note that John sent to Greg, that Greg responded to, which I think it looks like you've already covered those issues. The NPDES permit is already in the decision, right?
Yeah.
And then John was asking about drainage calculations and operation and maintenance plans. But I think those, we've seen all those too, right?
I think we've got one that's still to be provided before the pre-construction. I think that's the erosion.
Yeah, there's some things that we want to put on.
Yeah,
erosion control and that's what.
So can I assume that's the sense of the board that we would go with the waiver?
Yeah, I mean, that's.
That's my sense.
Okay, mine too. The other issue that I had, and I guess you mentioned it earlier, and that is the agreement with the butter with Morning Glories. I think that's been lingering out there. I know that you've met with them, talked with them, and have got some verbals from them. That's kind of a key to where we are.
Well, I think that any of the work of the definitive subdivision plan is on Mr. Ford's property. Even if it wasn't the easement is written in such a way that Mr. Ford would have the right to actually do that work without getting the consent of the Morning Glories. They have the right to improve that for utility purposes. So I would agree that if there is an obligation, a maintenance obligation for Mr. Ford to maintain any of the components of the Morning Glory property drainage system, that there should be an agreement in place. Very much like whether it's pre-construction, that a homeowners association has to be in place. So I think, given the feedback that Greg has gotten, he's developed a rapport with the folks at Morning Glories. I think it's pretty safe to say that you could condition the approval for having that maintenance plan in place with the neighbors for, obviously construction would begin. Similar to like a homeowners association on the subdivision plan. We would have to have that document in place. And
There's a couple of proposed conditions that
Yeah.
would do that. You know, one is that,
Where is that?
It's condition number 20, proposed condition 20. Sorry, no page numbers today. And this is required before the pre-construction. Something would have to be provided showing some written document showing that the owners of Morning Glories agreed to the applicant installing this 130 feet of vertical granite curb and the easement and to the maintenance of the leaching catch basins. By the applicant and then by the homeowners association or whatever we're going to call that association. In case there's a business and a home, I think we're calling it the property owners
Property owners
association or something.
association, right?
we'll make something up.
Yeah. The owners association, whatever.
And Laura, has the applicant had a chance to review this that was in our packet?
Yeah, they got this a couple days ago.
Mhm.
Okay.
So that's all for construction to start.
Yeah.
Okay, so the two missing waivers included in the conditions?
They're at the very end.
Yeah. Scituate subdivision rules and regulations waiver.
There's a,
So procedurally, we don't need to vote anything before we go into the
yeah,
discussion?
no, I think you can do this, so you can make this motion and then you can go into discussion.
Oh, okay. Laura, I think Greg has something. I think it's third.
The waivers, I just did a quick summary of what you voted in last time versus what's listed on the plan. There are three. They're showing the full lot build out. The second one, we partially addressed. We referenced one section, and it was to waive the requirement for a homeowners association. That pops up in section 6.346, and you waived that requirement that we provide the homeowners association. It is also asked for again in another section, 7.313. So we need to ask for that section.
That's
Okay,
in
we've
draft.
got, we've got,
So
Laura
we've got
got
that
that was the
right.
homeowners association, and then the redevelopment stormwater. Those are the three waivers that have yet to be voted.
Yeah,
So
they're all
I think
there.
I think we've got it in the
It's
conditions.
just referenced in a different section.
Okay. So shall we proceed with the
We
motion?
have all of
Sure.
Is there a motion?
Yeah.
those. Everybody kind of sit back and relax.
Canned, rested, and ready to go?
Anything else beforehand?
I think we're there.
Okay.
If you pass it along, Richard, you wouldn't have to do the whole thing.
That's fine. I'll go, that's a good idea. I'll go up to the first general requirements of that. And then you can do the endorsement of definitive subdivision.
Sure.
Just go till you're tired,
Okay.
hand it off.
Say next.
I move to approve the definitive subdivision plan of Greenbush Park at 50 Country Way based on the following criteria. Number one, completeness and technicality, or technical adequacy of all submissions. Two, determination that development at this location does not entail unwarranted hazard to safety, health, and convenience of future residents of the development or of others. Three, conformity with the requirements of section 6.0 and 7.0 of the Town of Scituate subdivision rules and regulations, except as specifically waived by the planning board and the zoning bylaw. Number four, determination that the subdivision as designed will not cause substantial and irreversible damage to the environment, which damage could be avoided or ameliorated through an alternative development plan. And subject to the following conditions and waivers previously voted upon, wherever a condition refers to the applicant, this shall include his successors or assigns as applicable. General requirements. Number one, all construction work shall be done in accordance with the plans submitted by Morse Engineering Company Incorporated entitled Definitive Subdivision Plan, Greenbush Park, 50 Country Way, Assessors Parcels 53-5-3 and 53-5-3B. Scituate, Massachusetts, dated February 9th, 2014, as revised through November 19th, 2014, together with any additional revisions needed to conform to the conditions contained herein, the definitive subdivision plan. Number 2, where this definitive subdivision plan requires approval, permitting or licensing from any local, state, or federal agency, such required approval, permitting, or licensing is deemed a condition of the Town of Scituate Planning Board's, the Planning Board, or the Board, approval of this definitive subdivision plan, included but not limited to the Planning Board's approval of work in the public right-of-way of Countryway. Number 3, construction of the definitive subdivision shall meet all requirements of the Scituate subdivision rules and regulations, dated August 13th, 2010, except as otherwise specifically waived and recorded herein by the Planning Board. All such conditions of approval and waivers granted by the Planning Board shall be inscribed on the definitive subdivision plan prior to endorsement by the Board. Number 4, the applicant shall mean the current applicant and all of the successors in interest, the applicant. The applicant shall complete the construction of all ways and municipal services within 3 years of the date of endorsement of the definitive subdivision plan. The Board may extend said period for good cause shown upon receiving a written request from the applicant prior to the expiration of said period, which request shall provide a detailed description of the good cause necessitating an extension. Number 5, the total number of residential dwelling units on the site shall not exceed 1, except for permitted accessory dwellings. No lot in the definitive subdivision may be further divided or subdivided to create additional building lots. Number 6, the applicant shall construct streets and complete all other work specified on the definitive subdivision plan or required under the Scituate subdivision rules and regulations, except those sections specifically waived by the Planning Board, meet all relative provisions of the Scituate zoning bylaws and other bylaws, including but not limited to the installation of all the required utilities in such subdivision and off-site, and all work incidental thereto, such as grading of lots to provide drainage, construction of walkways, retaining walls, and other details, and installation of water main connecting to Countryway, as outlined in section 7.0 of these rules and regulations, and is specifically required by the Planning Board within 3 years of the date of endorsement of the definitive subdivision plan. The applicant shall maintain all streets and utilities, including the system of stormwater management, with the exception of water service, within the subdivision until such time as maintenance is performed by the homeowners association. Unless and until a street within the subdivision, definitive subdivision, is accepted by town meeting as a public way, all streets, those portions of the drainage system within the street layout, and other improvements within the street layout and or within the definitive subdivision shall be operated and maintained by the applicant or a duly authorized homeowners association made up of the residents of the subdivision or their representatives. The applicant shall inform the Planning Board in writing within 7 days of the date that his or her maintenance responsibilities are assumed by the homeowners association. Such written notification shall also identify the officers of the homeowners association and the name, phone number, and email of the homeowners association contact person. Number 7, the applicant shall grant to the town of Scituate a right and easement to construct, repair, replace, extend, operate, use, and forever maintain all streets, water mains, and the stormwater management system, including all surface and subsurface stormwater drains in, through, or under the streets and easements as indicated on the definitive subdivision plan. The above shall not be construed to relieve the applicant and his successors in title to the ownership of a portion of the land or any street within the subdivision or the stormwater management system which is generally not accepted by the town, nor diminish in any way the applicant's responsibility to complete all construction as required by the applicant's agreements with the town and to thereafter maintain all streets and utilities in satisfactory condition unless or until they are accepted by the town. Easements shall be provided, 1, to allow the homeowners association access to drainage and stormwater management systems in order to allow the homeowners association to privately inspect, maintain, and repair. And 2, to allow the town of Scituate similar access in case of an emergency or to test water quality if this is deemed in the public interest. Next, section 8. The applicant shall consent to allow members and employees of the planning board and other persons acting under the authority of the planning board as its agents to enter upon any lands and carry out such surveys and inspections as may be deemed necessary and place and maintain monuments and marks. As a condition of subdivision approved by the planning board, the applicant shall cooperate with the planning board and the town officials and assist them in their efforts to verify that the layout, design, and construction work in the applicant's subdivision are satisfactory and conform to the definitive subdivision plan, the town specifications, and the requirements of the planning board. Number 9, any modifications of this definitive subdivision plan other than as authorized by Massachusetts General Law, section, C 41, chapter 41, section .881.0, shall require modification by the planning board in accordance with General Law, chapter 41, section 81W. Failure to comply with this requirement will result in rescission of the planning board's approval.
Okay. Then required prior to board endorsement of definitive subdivision plan. Number 10, all conditions of approval and waivers granted shall be inscribed upon this definitive subdivision plan prior to endorsement by the board. Number 11, prior to endorsement of the definitive plan, the following additions or changes shall be made to the definitive plan. All items associated with drainage or stormwater management shall be reviewed by the planning board's consulting engineer prior to endorsement. Let's see. Okay, I guess this is following. So, the symbol for bounds shall be darkened or additional bounds shall be added as per the recommendation of the planning board's consulting engineer. B, notes indicating stormwater from the roadway could be discharged to the basin shall be changed or removed. C, a method of protecting the detention basin shall be added and reviewed and approved by the planning board's consulting engineer. D, a note indicating no silt shall be pumped to the basin shall be added. On sheet 5, roadway plan and profile, suitable screening of the residential lot by such means as wood fences and dense native evergreen hedges of 5 feet or more at time of planning shall be added with a note that screening shall be installed prior to a certificate of occupancy being granted. F, on sheet 6, the erosion control plan, sub-item 1, proposed dimensions and size of temporary sediment basins. Sub-item 2, a plan and details for protection of pipe outlets. And sub-item 3, planting times for planting to protect disturbed lands from erosion. Item G, on sheets showing the stormwater management system. 1, an emergency spillway for the detention basin. 2, access to all sides of the detention basin for maintenance. 3, a low-level drain for maintenance of the detention basin consistent with DEP standards. 4, current watershed map corresponding with the proposed stormwater management system. 5, information on the size of existing leaching pits and adjacent grading and requirements to upgrade. Does that sound right? 6, quantification of stormwater flow for a 100-year storm from the front and rear catch basins and proposed accommodation of said flow accounting for tailwater. Item 12, the applicant shall maintain the endorsement of the planning board, the endorsement of the planning board upon the definitive subdivision plan within 180 days of the date of the approval by the board and termination of the appeal period of such approval. Failure to obtain such endorsement shall result in the automatic rescission of the approval of such plan. 13, a covenant or other form of surety as provided for in Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81U, shall be provided to guarantee construction of the road, drainage improvements, and additional on or off-site improvements agreed to by the applicant. Parens, the covenant. The covenant shall be provided to the planning board by the owners of record of the land in the subdivision prior to endorsement of the definitive subdivision plan. This covenant shall run with the land and be binding upon the owners and their successors in interest. Upon approval of the covenant by the planning board, reference thereto shall be inscribed upon the definitive subdivision plan, and which shall be recorded along with the covenant at the expense of the applicant. The town planner shall assist the applicant in all required filings at the Registry of Deeds to ensure documents are recorded and the town is provided recorded copies of decisions, drawings, and covenants. Number 14, in addition to the covenant required to secure the construction of ways and installation of municipal services, the applicant shall, prior to the endorsement of the subdivision plan, submit a supplemental covenant containing those conditions of approval that are intended to survive the release of the covenant, in parens the supplemental covenant. The supplemental covenant shall be approved as deformed by the planning board's legal counsel. The supplemental covenant shall be executed and duly recorded by the owners of record of the land and shall run with the land. The supplemental covenant shall be referenced on the definitive subdivision plan prior to recording the plan in the Registry of Deeds. The applicant shall promptly, after recording, send a copy of the supplemental covenant showing book and page number to the board. Number 15, all storm drains on the site shall be class 52 ductile iron with a minimum of 1.5 feet of cover over the top of the pipes. The definitive subdivision plan shall be amended and submitted to the board to reflect this condition prior to endorsement. Somebody else want to pick up from there?
Want me to try it, Bill?
Yeah.
Sure.
Required prior to pre-construction conference, number 16, following the board's endorsement, the applicant shall, within 6 months of such endorsement, file the definitive subdivision plan with the Plymouth County Registry of Deeds and shall transmit 1, Mylar reproducible of the recorded definitive subdivision plan, 1 each to the planning board and DPW, and 2, 5 paper copies of the recorded definitive subdivision plan to the planning board for distribution to the DPW Engineering Division, the DPW Water Division, the Building Department, the Planning Board's consulting engineer, and the Planning Board. All plans in the definitive subdivision plan drawing set must be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. 17. Prior to the pre-construction conference, the following information shall be provided to the Planning Board. All items associated with drainage or stormwater management shall be reviewed and approved by the Planning Board's consulting engineer. A, memo from the fire chief indicating his approval of the proposed fire hydrant location. B, soils data for the existing leaching pits proposed to be reused and current watershed maps. C, documentation of the access and utility easement. All additional information and changes to plans required prior to endorsement or the pre-construction conference shall be reviewed by the town planner and the planning board's consulting engineer. If further waivers or approvals are required, the board shall review and approve same prior to the pre-construction conference. 19, the applicant shall provide a draft homeowners association agreement and sufficient funds for review by town council prior to a pre-construction meeting. Following review and approval by the board, the homeowners association agreement shall be recorded at the registry of deeds prior to the town building department's issuance of any occupancy permit. The homeowners association agreement shall include the operation and maintenance plan approved by the planning board's consulting engineer, and shall be written to include the owners of the proposed single-family home and the office building, the operation and maintenance agreement. Number 20, documentation that the owners of 52 Country Way, presently occupied by Morning Glory's Bakery, agree to, 1, the applicant's installation of approximately 130 feet of vertical granite curb, and 2, the ongoing and perpetual maintenance of a manhole and 2 reaching catch basins in the access and utility easement on their property, initially by the applicant and ultimately by the homeowners association of 50 Country Way. 21, prior to the pre-construction conference, the applicant shall provide the planning board with a copy of the recorded definitive subdivision plan on disk in CAD .dwg format. 22, prior to the pre-construction conference, the applicant shall provide to the planning board, A, copies of the NPDES permit, including its stormwater pollution prevention plan. B, a check to cover cost of inspections by the town's consulting engineer. The specific amount shall be estimated by the planning department. Such estimate shall be subject to amendment from time to time and shall be supplemented by the applicant as requested by the planning department. C, a construction schedule, including approximate dates for items in the subdivision rules and regulations 9.1.3. Want to pick it up, Bob?
Sure, yeah, no, I didn't. Required prior to the start of construction. 23, a pre-construction conference shall be held with the applicant, their representatives, their engineer, the site contractors, the town planner, the planning board's consulting engineer, and other representatives of the town as the board feels are necessary. A pre-construction conference will not be scheduled until conditions 18 and 19 are complete. A list of all contractor contacts, including names and telephone numbers, shall be provided to the planning board and the DPW. At least one telephone contact shall be available 24 hours per day in the event of emergency. 24, prior to the start of construction, a street sign shall be erected in accordance with the U.S. DOT Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, 2009 edition, Chapter D3-1, Sheet 1 of 3. Copies are available at the Planning Board office. The name of the street shall be approved by the Police Department and Planning Board. Required during construction. 25, construction shall not begin prior to 7 a.m. weekdays and 8 a.m. on Saturdays and shall cease no later than 7 p.m. or sunset, whichever is earlier. No construction shall take place on Sundays or legal or federal holidays. 26, the stabilized construction entrance per the definitive subdivision plan must be installed prior to any earth disturbing activities on site, including but not limited to clearing and grubbing. Construction vehicles and equipment shall not use the existing shared access and utility easement with Morning Glories except during construction within the easement. Access to Morning Glory's driveway, parking area, building, and property must be maintained at all times. Item 27, all earth-moving disturbance operations shall only occur while erosion and sedimentation control measures per the definitive subdivision plan and approved by the town planner are in place. Such control measures shall remain in place until the board's consulting engineer determines after consultation with the town planner that the danger of erosion or sedimentation no longer exists. Item 28, except for clearing, grubbing, road construction, and paving, a subdivision road shall be kept clear and passable at all times. No equipment shall be parked or stored so as to render the street impassable. No portion of the subdivision road or cul-de-sac shall be used as a staging area. No parking or unloading on Country Way shall be permitted during construction. 29, the applicant shall notify the owner of Morning Glories, 52 Country Way, a minimum of 3 business days prior to the installation of the vertical granite curb to be placed at the edge of the access and utility easement. This curb installation work shall not occur before 9 a.m. or within 4 days of Easter, Valentine's Day, Thanksgiving, or Christmas Day, or any 4 holidays defined by the owner of Morning Glories. 30, inspections and observations made according to the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, the SWIP, shall be submitted to the board within 48 hours after the inspections. The board reserves the right to require the consulting engineer to visit the site weekly during times when required construction and inspections are further apart. 31, the property line between number 50 and number 52 Country Way and boundary of the limit of clearing shall be marked or flagged in the field under the direction of a surveyor and notification given to the town planner and consulting engineer a minimum of 3 business days prior to the start of construction. Item 32, construction of the proposed subdivision road and proposed drainage system shall be supervised by a registered professional engineer who shall certify in writing to the planning board and DPW at completion that the proposed subdivision roads and drainage system were constructed in accordance with the approved definitive subdivision plan. This certification shall be accompanied by as-built plans signed and stamped by a professional land surveyor and their supervising professional engineer. Prior to application for building permits, item 33. Before applications for building permits for construction on Lot 2, the applicant shall submit plans for a site plan review in accordance with Section 770 of the Scituate zoning bylaw. The board reserves the right to require a full traffic analysis for the commercial use proposed. Item 34, no new underground irrigation system shall be allowed to connect to the town's water distribution system or in any manner use municipal water in accordance with the policy made effective by the Board of Selectmen on October 8, 2014. All irrigation systems installed in accordance with the policy must be supplied by on-site sources at the expense of the property owner. Item 35, interim as-built plans shall be prepared for all drainage or detention basins, rain gardens, and infiltration structures, and the roadway system and provided to the planning board for approval prior to any building permits for new structures or buildings are issued. Interim as-built plans shall confirm that the roadway and drainage basins are properly constructed, stabilized, located in the approved location, and properly sized, so that the required storage capability is available and no upland necessary for adjacent lots has been used. The location of the drainage basin and all drainage easements shall be confirmed by setting a minimum of 2 bounds and shall be tied to at least 2 bounds of the subdivision way and to the Mass State Plane coordinate system. Interim as-built plans shall be signed and stamped by a registered professional engineer and professional land surveyor. Want to take a swing at some? Sure. All right.
Prior to application.
Excuse me, just for the record, Ann's reading, but she's not voting.
Oh.
Right,
Vicky.
thank you. Prior to application for occupancy permits, number 36. Prior to application for occupancy permits, the sewer line connections and grading will be reviewed with the Board of Health to make sure it conforms to the approved plans and to assure that the sewer will not interfere, excuse me, with drainage either within the development or onto abutting properties. 37, prior to issuance of any occupancy permit, a registered professional engineer shall inspect the lot and certify with his signature and stamp to the planning board and building commissioner that any variation in grade from the original plan is insignificant and does not in any way alter the drainage calculations, the function of the stormwater management system, or the rate of volume of stormwater flow onto abutting properties. Acceptance of street as a town way. Number 38. Approval of the definitive subdivision plan does not constitute the laying out or acceptance by the town of streets shown on the plan. For additional clarity, the subdivision shall remain a private way, the operations and maintenance of which remain the sole responsibility of the applicant and subsequently the homeowners association, unless or until such streets are accepted by the town. Ongoing. 39. A certification of compliance with the operations and maintenance plan shall be provided to the planning board on or before January 31 of every calendar year. And to waive compliance with the following sections of the Town of Scituate subdivision rules and regulations. Sections 7.3.1.2.d, design, basis, and method, to waive the requirement for stormwater calculations to assume the lots to be fully developed. Stormwater calculations for the individual lots will be provided prior to lot development as part of the site plan review. Section 7.3.1.3, Homeowners Association, to waive the requirement for a draft homeowners association document with the submittal and require it prior to a pre-construction meeting and recorded prior to the first occupancy permit. And to waive compliance with the following sections of the Town of Scituate stormwater regulations. To waive the requirement of Section 9, Stormwater Management Performance Standards, Paragraph 4, that for redevelopment projects within the Water Resource Protection District, a 90% renewal rate of total suspended solids by source controls, pollution prevention measures, and best management practices shall be required.
Second.
Could you do that one more time? What is that about, naming the street? I think I'm calling it Ford Place 2.
Close also.
Do we have a hold on any of those?
Ford
No.
strikes back.
There you go.
Any
Ford will never build
any
a
comments
street.
from the applicant?
I'm sorry, Bill?
Any comments from the applicant? Any comments from the public? Do I have a second?
Second.
Can we
Can I ask
actually
a
look
question?
at a couple of these?
Do we do that after the
Oh,
second or
after
before?
the second, okay, yeah.
Okay, so we've got a second, now the discussion.
Okay, did you have any?
Well, but I can do it afterwards if that's okay. I just wanted to know if we needed to, well, I'm here, I'm doing it right away. Didn't need to waive the, or should we waive the, what we talked about the redevelopment? I don't know the exact, is that here?
I think that's
That's
in
what
this
the
last
last
one.
one
Oh, okay, all
That's
right,
the
okay, I didn't
redevelopment
quite
there.
understand that, all right.
But we need to change the review of site plan, we need to add in the house, right?
Yep.
Yeah, actually, when I was thinking about that, looking at number 33, that seemed like a good place for them to go.
Yeah, that's where I marked it down.
I was going to suggest something like the board reserves the right to require stormwater permits prior to construction on either lot and a full traffic analysis for any commercial use proposed. And I guess I was going to start before application for building permits for construction of any building other than a single or two-family home, the applicant shall submit plans for a site plan review. Because that's, really what they have to do under zoning. And then just saying.
Okay, so 33 is reading before application of building permits for construction on any, you're striking lot 2?
Yeah, just construction of a building other than a single or two-family home on either lot.
Okay.
Anything else?
Laura?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I do have a comment, but I'll wait for you guys to finish.
Did we want to change homeowners association to simply owners association?
Property owners?
Property owners association?
Yeah, I think so.
That popped up a couple of times.
Just wholesale change,
Also change.
find and replace.
Yeah. there you go.
I want to change residence too, I thought we saw a reference to residents,
Oh, okay.
maybe just property owners. I think it's semantic.
Anything else?
The only other one was in number 36, we talked about the Board of Health reviewing the sewer line connections, and that should be the DPW sewer division.
Good night, Board of Health.
So it would be the sewer division that would do it. They go out.
What number is that one?
36.
Condition 23.
23.
We just need to change the numbers there to correspond.
Let's see.
I think it should be conditions 21 and 22 instead of 18 and 19.
Well, 21 is just the tag, maybe, I think definitely 22, but maybe 18 or 22. '18 is the one about all the items that have to be added and then reviewed by the town planner and the consulting engineer. So I thought that was one of the ones that was good to have there. And then the 22 has to do with things that have to be submitted before the pre-construction, so I think that's important too.
Yeah. Anything else? Last chance. I've got a second. All those in favor?
Aye. Now,
I want to congratulate you on
yeah.
your timing. It is now 8:30, which is the next agenda item.
I do have a quick question, just for clarification. So what's the reason, why couldn't they have two homes? You know, like, just because one needs to be commercial?
No, they could have two homes.
No, it says, on one of the conditions, there was only one.
Oh, okay, well, that's the one that I thought we just changed to.
Oh, did we? Maybe I was.
Well, if there's another one that's one.
Well, it says the total number of residential dwellings on the site shall not exceed one, number 5, in the first general plan.
We want to kind of change that. That's weird.
You made me have to read everything over.
I'm sorry, I should have asked that before, but I thought, okay, I'm gonna look stupid if I.
One per lot.
Per lot,
That makes
yes.
sense.
Second.
Approval was changed, yeah. Thank you.
We just voted and approved the re-amended. I think the next thing we got to do is figure out what we're going to do for continuation for your special permit.
You know, when do we get to talk about the real?
The real project.
Yeah, exactly.
We had some time tentatively set aside for that on the 18th.
Yeah, I have a motion in my folder.
Okay.
But it's not.
It says like an hour and a half for the 18th.
Okay, so we got an hour and a half. So I need a motion to continue.
Hang on.
Or do I have-
18th
Here
of
we
what?
go. Who's, it feels like we have.
December?
Next week.
I think they might have a meeting in the zoning at the same time.
Greg is the
The
same meeting.
ZBA is meeting that day.
Greg and Steve at the same meeting, so. He does it at 7 o'clock.
This is
So is that?
This is
not
at 8:30.
This is not until 8:30.
I'm not sure what
I'm good
time.
at that time.
I'm not sure what time.
That's when
it
you're
is.
tied up?
No, I'm good at 8:30 for you at that time. My other one is the second one on the list. Our other one, second one on the list, that starts at 7, so we should be at 8:30, no problem.
Oh, good. Is that
I'm not
the
sure
same
what
one?
time
I don't know
that's
about
at.
John.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm not sure it's Stockbridge Landing, I don't know what time that's on.
Oh,
I don't either. We'll have to find out.
Okay, well.
Tentatively go ahead with this then?
Let's tentatively
Yeah,
go
let's
with
do
it and we can change
Mark
it.
it.
I move to accept the applicant's request to continue the public hearing for the definitive subdivision plan for Greenbush Park at 50 Country Way and the mixed-use special permit in the Village Business Overlay District for 50 Country Way until December 18th, 2014 at 8:30 p.m. in the WPA building at 7 Henry Bailey Turner Road in Scituate.
Didn't we just approve the
Technically, you don't
definitive
have to
subdivision plan?
continue that.
Well, that's why, okay, yeah, I was
So just
confused.
strike that piece.
Greenbush Park is done.
Okay, so, I move to continue the public hearing for the mixed-use special permit in the Village Business Overlay District for 50 Country Way.
Although we haven't closed the hearing for the other one.
No, you can do that if you want to, at this point.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. You've just continued the special permit until the 18th of December, correct?
Yep.
Should it not be continued out further than that, in case you don't make a decision for filing purposes?
I think.
This is just the, this is just the public hearing. The decision has to be filed within 14 days of when the hearing is closed. We do this a little bit, we tweaked it a little bit, but it's not, it doesn't disregard the Chapter 48 deadlines at all. So.
Yeah, inherent in the extension is the 14 days from approval for time to file.
Yeah. It's the hearing that has to be started within 65 days, but there's no like endpoint as far as I'm aware. Are you on the same page with that?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah,
As
I
long as we
can,
continue, we agree to the extension, so we're fine. There is an endpoint, I think it's, you do have a time frame within which you have to make a decision, but the applicant can extend that time frame.
But last time it was
Right.
voted
We've
out
done.
to January 30th
Yeah.
to file both the mixed-use special permit and definitive subdivision plan.
So we did last time?
Yes,
Okay,
so
yeah.
we didn't need an extension this time because you're already within that time frame.
Right, but we're not doing the, I suppose, from this further my point, we're not doing the special permit hearing tonight, we're going to continue to next week. That's the motion, that's the meeting.
Well, it's on.
Let's talk about that.
So I have
So I'll second
I
it.
got a motion. Has it been seconded?
Second.
decision has to be within 90 days of the hearing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I think as long as the hearing's continued, you should be covered.
I got a motion, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Taking 2 weeks off and we'll see you.
Do we want to close?
2 weeks, it's next week.
1 week.
Whatever.
2 weeks is Christmas Day. Do you want to have to be Christmas Day?
So it is next week.
We're feverishly for the week, and then we'll see you then.
And you know it's at the WPA building in North Situate.
I like you guys.
You know it's the WPA building in North Situate.
By the tennis courts.
Oh, there's no tennis courts, dear, it's part of
Okay.
No, those are always going to be tennis courts.
Okay.
Do you see any cars there?
There were a few there today.
Okay.
Anyway, it's now 8:30. Trying to move on here. It's now 8:30. The next item is the presentation discussion on Chapter 40R for business and property owners. We got Matt Smith, Senior Regional Planner for MAPC. We're going to be putting, for those that are here for 40R, it's going to be put up on that wall, so you may want to move closer.
Basically, we take advantage of the zoning by statute.
Do you think someday we could use our new auditorium? Our potential new auditorium?
2017. You got to run for reelection again first.
Well, I meant at the potentially new junior high school. And high school.
Procedure, yes.
The new facility.
There's lights on one circuit, I think we still in the first row.
I don't know.
It should continue to get a little bit brighter.
Oh, okay.
Suggest you may want to move down so you can see.
It's a much shorter version.
So, Laura, you want to give us a couple comments before we put that to work?
Sure. For everybody that came, this is Matt Smith. Matt's the Senior Regional Planner from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. He's been working very closely with the Economic Development Commission. He's produced several reports for them. They're up on the town website. They're very interesting. They talk a lot about what type of market area Scituate is, what the age and population and other parameters are that affect what people can do here and succeed at as far as a business. There were also some pieces of his work that involved looking at the market area for Scituate, and it really all revolved around what type of businesses do we have the sites for and the market for. So what should we be looking for? There were a couple of very interesting recommendations of his report, and one of them that the planning board has been talking about has been something called 40R zoning. It's something that other towns are doing across the state. Plymouth is one, Kingston, Andover, Reading, Salem, some towns that are fairly progressive. And it's a mixed use, somewhat similar to the Village Business District that Scituate already has, except, well, Matt will tell you like all the benefits of it. So I'm just gonna let Matt go with it.
Great, thanks, Laura. Thank you for having me. So what I'll do today is I'm just going to provide just a quick overview, hopefully quick, of the actual economic development study and how the recommendation for the 40R district came to be. Then highlight, for those who have not heard this yet, what the benefits are of a 40R over your current overlay, and then take some questions. I also have some handouts at the end of the meeting that provide links to more information about 40R, some links and some short links to the actual economic development study on your town website, and some other information as well.
Let me interrupt. The MAPC study is on the EDC website.
It is. It's actually on your town website under the EDC page. You can link to it very quickly. There's one here, but if you go to the documents or resources on the home page, it's under economic development. So just in terms of what we're talking about, so just a really quick overview of the current conditions that we did. The key finding is that the population is aging in Scituate. It's growing slightly, but your households are actually growing faster. Basically, as households are getting smaller, if, for instance, if you have 100 people and the average size is 3 people, you'd need 33 households. It's going down closer to 2 over time, so you're going to need more households, 50 households for that same population. So there's going to be need for more housing units. Your current housing is predominantly single family and owner occupied. Your median prices are high compared to both the surrounding county and the state. In particular, your condo prices are very expensive, and there's a lack of ownership opportunities, particularly for those who are downsizing and those who are looking at first-time home ownership. In general, there's not enough rental units in town. That was said by both brokers that we spoke to, but also data. Many of your actual rental stock is actually more seasonally based, particularly in the summer, so it's not available for year-round. In general, the demand is projected through MAPC to be about 700 new housing units over the next 15 to 20 years. The majority, as we just said, of growth will be in senior households, but then also young professionals, those smaller singles households, as well as couples without kids, kind of the entry-level market coming into Scituate. Many of those people prefer smaller units. So the growth opportunity is those smaller, less expensive units, predominantly in multifamily situations of different types, everything from townhomes to more traditional apartments and condominiums in multifamily situations. And the big finding from the market study and the study is that mixed use in all the village areas, that includes the harbor, North Scituate, but in particular Greenbush hold a lot of potential for this. Rental opportunity would also be great in Greenbush as well. These charts at the bottom, what they're really showing is that the left chart is that large blue chunk is what your current single family, that little tiny slivers is what every other type of unit is in town. Community Opportunities Group, who did our analysis, said really through the analysis of current preferences of households, really you could use a lot more two-family and townhome, multifamily, both condo and rental. So that was a big finding. In terms of the economy, just really quickly, I won't go through all the details, but in general, you do have a small economy here in Scituate. In terms of jobs, there's about 1 job for every 3 people in your workforce. So you're exporting workers essentially out of town. Of the businesses that are here, just under 3,400 workers. The highest concentration is education, your public education system. Healthcare is quite large here, actually. Accommodation and food service, that's more tourist-based. Your restaurants, your retail, that's here. And then also some maritime trades. Your wages for jobs here are lower, although actually if you look at your incomes, they're higher than the state, the average income, but there is low employment growth projected. So you have to be very strategic with what you're doing. In terms of the opportunity sectors identified in the study, the maritime sector, everything from your current fishing fleet, which is small but more like research, recreation, as well as education. Tourism, you have a pretty strong tourism industry, but it is growing, so you can build that further, particularly around water. Hospitality, there was identified the need for another hotel within the region, and that could be supported here likely. More restaurants. Also retail, 80,000 square feet of new retail could be supported based on a gap analysis, which is a supply and demand. Essentially, there's leakage here. You're going outside of town for certain segments that could be captured locally. So you could get about 80,000 square feet, the majority of which would likely be in Greenbush, given the size of the parcels and availability. There is a market for some office, not a lot, but it would probably be medical or smaller professional offices. And then housing, multifamily and mixed use, which I'll describe. There's actually a fiscal benefit to multifamily and mixed use, particularly in places like Greenbush, North Scituate, et cetera. Because we're talking about a 40R in the Greenbush area, I'm just going to talk specifically about the opportunities here. Currently, you already have retail. There's mostly independent retailers, and then some eating and drinking establishments, as well as some convenience, things like Dunkin' Donuts that are there. Your housing, there's quite a few condominiums along the water. And then single family is the predominant use surrounding the area. There's also a lot of vacant land. In terms of the growth, retail, probably about 2/3 of the total potential that was identified would probably go to Greenbush. It has the largest parcels that could accommodate this, and to concentrate it would make a lot of sense. So it would be resident but also commuter driven. You have a lot of commuters that go there every day, and if you can maximize that, that would be great. So the other things, just convenience, specialty foods, maybe a small market, that would be convenient. Maybe some smaller regional chains, things like maybe 4 or 5 establishments, maybe someone looking for a second or third storefront, particularly something that might be currently located near a train station. And then housing, multifamily and mixed use. So this is all derived, a lot of this from the retail gap analysis, which really showed that the whole area is underserved. There's more spending potential within the area than that's currently being spent there. So you do have the opportunity to capture more there. Other opportunities, right now you do have predominantly medical offices that are in the area, but there's growth for some more professional offices, either medical, smaller establishments. Second offices, it's a growing trend, particularly as people can commute. Those who commute into Boston who may want a second office locally, there are more and more people renting smaller spaces, so that's an opportunity in the area as well. And then also more like local lawyers, architects, accountants, things like that. Also, based on the hotel could potentially be located here. Within the plan, we talk about either in Greenbush or maybe even potentially putting it on Widow's Walk, sharing part of the Widow's Walk golf course property. The larger recommendations from the plan, this is very simple. I'm just going to go that was really just the big goals: the improved marketing of Scituate locally and regionally to attract more visitors, but also investment in general. So that's attracting developers, attracting new residents, attracting business. So a growing and thriving tourism industry with more amenities and programming year-round. The idea is to build on what you already have more events, look for more opportunities for water-based sport and recreation. These things bring in actually people, and then spending, more likely to go to your restaurants, which you actually have a local excise meal tax, which gives you more revenue. How do you build that revenue? That's actually number 6 too. So expand those maritime industries. You already have, now we're here to build on that. Research and education would be really beneficial. It would bring more people to town. It would bring actually more attention to town as well. Further grow the healthcare cluster. One of the things we talk about in the plan is that you are relatively isolated here. So you're not going to get the big development you're going to get along a highway. But what you could do is start building on what you already have. In healthcare, actually, you have a nice cluster so that healthcare industry tends to cluster around each other. There's the ability to maybe grow that as well. And then again, identify those additional revenue sources. Because you heavily rely on your residential tax base, over 95% of tax receipts, the idea of anywhere you can pick up extra money, even in small increments, will help you. So you already have a recently adopted meals tax, so if you become more of even a larger restaurant destination, that will actually add more revenue to the town. Should you get another hotel, and you already have an inn or more B&Bs in town, if you adopt a local occupancy tax as well, which is in most communities have, that also brings more. So you want to look for those opportunities to bring in money whenever you can. More specific to what we're going to talk about today with 40R, this is goal 2. the market analysis and the existing conditions analysis really found that the best strategy here is to concentrate development, particularly in your existing villages, really further support them. So you've got the harbor and it's doing well in your village business. Overlay district has really helped there. You've gotten the kind of development you wanted. It has not really happened in Greenbush yet, nor has it happened in North Scituate. North Scituate is really constrained right now because they don't have sewer. Greenbush, however, does. So it's probably your largest opportunity. So that's strategy 2A. So it's continue to focus new development, commercial, multifamily, residential, mixed use in those existing village centers. Within the document that you can see online, there's actually a specific strategy for Greenbush itself that kind of lays it out. But it really is, one of the recommendations was to consider the 40R smart growth district, which I'm going to talk about, with sub-districts of varying densities. Other things within this actually are supported in Greenbush. Ensure infrastructure can support desired development types. It already does here. You have the infrastructure in place. That's great. Advocate for improved public transit to and from Scituate. You're actually already getting a pilot program for weekend service, so that's really good. So that's already helping, which would further support Greenbush. The other, study potential for additional development at Town and Widows Walk Golf Course. It's so close, so things that are happening there would also be helpful for Greenbush, particularly since you pass through Greenbush on the way. Most people will from 3A. And then identify strategic parcels with Route 3A. So there could be some. The interesting thing about Greenbush is it's the only village area you have that's visible from 3A. With the rotary there, the more that you have there, the concentration, the more attention that it could get. So the visibility is really key, particularly for trying to attract the retail as well. So that's something to consider. So this all kind of led to doing a further economic opportunity analysis. What we did, and I'll just quickly go over this, it's very detailed, but to create these village plans, we called opportunity site analysis, where we looked at which sites held the greatest potential. We had a scoring system. It had to do with the size of the parcels, scored higher, fewer or common ownership, like one or two owners, if it was several parcels, scored higher. The ability to develop more than what's already there, scored higher. So we did that. Greenbush had the highest opportunity of all the villages. We also did a revenue analysis where we looked at mixed use versus retail only. So someone could come in and just do a one-story retail building, which many people think, oh great, it's adding to our commercial tax base, rather than just residential. Well, it turned out in most of the analysis, and this is highlighted in one of the appendices, that even though it would be residential in part, is mixed use, there's far more revenue that would be generated in a mixed use scenario than from just a commercial. So that higher density in general brings in more revenue. And you don't really want to change the overall feel of your community, but there are these pockets where you could densify more, and around a train station is one of the best places to do it. Greenbush was identified as holding the highest opportunity. The large parcels, the commuter rail station, as well as the visibility. These are some of the things that really hit that. So this is actually from the plan. This was a very conceptual idea, and in large part it's based in your current overlay, where you do have the ability for higher density. But right now there's no real, I'm just going to point you, there's no real center. There's some structure, there's some business over here. There's the shopping center here, but then there's the MBTA. There's just not really a center. There's no there currently. And the idea would be to create that center. So if you could maybe do a higher density mixed use more to the east of the train, because there's that, there's the big wall, so this area is a little separated. You've got better traffic flow, even going into the harbor village. This would make the most sense. The area along Country Way, right here, could be more of like a slightly less dense mixed use center. And then we really thought, you already have this residential multifamily all down here. You need to extend it further up so that what you're doing is you're creating a nice center. It's what's becoming more preferable, more walkable, but you're also creating some higher densities, but not very high densities surrounding it. So you're supporting it more in general. And then there's a nice buffer as you get to the true single-family neighborhoods around it. So the other thing would be to create that central, but then also you want to try to get business attraction and marketing efforts away, and then really make sure your signage is good to gain attention. Which leads us to the zoning approaches, and one of the main thing we're here to talk about. Right now you have the Village Business Overlay District. So what it does is it allows mixed use by special permit. The base density that you go up to is 16 dwelling units per 40,000 square feet, so it's approximately 16 an acre. You can go up to 17 to 20 in Greenbush currently with certain benefits that they're added. The harbor, though, goes up to 36 dwelling units, which is interesting. It's much higher even though there's no transit. And then, where's the other? And then right now, the underlying zoning allows for 4 units. So there's still some residential allowed in the underlying zoning. Heights are about 3.5 stories, I believe, or 40 feet. It's a little unclear, actually, when I've reviewed it. And there's a requirement for 15% of units to be affordable. That's your current overlay. What you could do, you could actually change the overlay, except your overlay is in several places. So it would be more complicated to just change the overlay because it would apply to different areas unless there's a lot of specificity. But you could, for instance, increase the density in Greenbush. You could add ground floor retail requirement changes like only street facing. You don't have, hundreds of thousands of retail potential. You want to strategically place it closest to the road. And there could be more design criteria. The other option that we recommended is what we call 40R Smart Growth Overlay District. This is a state law that essentially encourages municipalities to zone, I'm going to read this because it gets a little more complicated, for dense residential and or mixed-use smart growth, which is typically around transit centers, stations, as well as town centers. It's where there's compact growth already existing often. So Greenbush fits all of these. It's near a transit center, with a commuter rail there. There is potential for concentrated development. There's infrastructure there to support it, so that's good. You've already made that investment. And there's, there's just the overall land available for it. Wouldn't have a lot of intrusion into, you wouldn't have to basically be having a ton of, I would say, single-family homes that are in the middle of what could be a higher density area. So there's a way that you can actually kind of specify what goes where. Many communities have adopted 40R across the state. Everything in yellow, each one of these communities has adopted it. And there's reasons for it. First, there are certain requirements, and we'll talk about that. It's required of mixed income housing, which is what your overlay requires now, except instead of 15%, it needs 20%. So it's just 5% more. It's not a big deal in terms of the number of units. It's actually pretty insignificant. So it's very similar. However, there's incentive payments that come to the town, both to create the zoning, but also for every unit that is permitted. I'm going to go through those incentives in a minute. The big difference is that the 40R densities have to be allowed by right. So if a developer or a property owner wants to develop a property and it fits within the parameters of the zoning, it has to be allowed as long as it hits those specific criteria within the zoning itself. Interesting, it can be more than one sub-district. So within the 40R district, you can have a higher density area, a lower density area. You can have a combination of multifamily in one area, then another one can be more 2 or 3 family or even single family. It's just a certain density. So for single family, it's a minimum of 8 units per acre. So these are dense, smaller single family. It's very similar to many cluster bylaws, but you don't need all the extra land around it. 2 or 3 family, at least 12 units per acre, and for multifamily, it's a minimum of 20. Right now, your overlay's hitting 20 at its higher range, so it's very similar in that sense. The site plan review and design guidelines is what's different. Like, they are built into it, so that's part of the process. As long as you match that, you can do that, you can build. Here's the interesting one, there's incentives. So this is what helps for the town, especially for a town that relies a lot on your residential tax base. So that what we call zoning incentive payments. So when the municipality adopts the 40R, depending on how many units can potentially be built, and there's calculations, and I know Laura's already started doing this, there's a payment once it's adopted that the state will make to the municipality. So if it's total of up to 20 units, which right here is a small payment of $10,000. When you get up to this district would be somewhere would be either this, the 101 to 500 total potential units. The town would receive $350,000. If it's 500 or more units, $600,000. That's before anything's ever built. This comes to the town. Some towns use that money specifically for improvements within the district. Others go to general fund. That has to be determined by the town. But that's money that comes in just for doing the zoning.
It's unrestricted.
It is unrestricted. Some do restrict it, but just saying that's how it does. But typically, actually, it goes into the general fund. In that sense.
How many people per unit? You use these units per unit?
Per unit is just the unit itself. A unit could be a single-family home, would be 1 unit.
Okay.
If there's 10 within, a smaller multifamily building, that would be 10 units.
Okay.
So it's the total unit count based on what those districts you would determine would be.
Okay.
So you basically take a unit count per acre, you apply it. I'm going to show, actually there'll be an example in a second where I can kind of say. So then there's the other one. Then what they call, there's a bonus unit payment. Once you've got the zoning, within that, if you go through 40R, every unit that's built or that's permitted, there's what they call this payment, a bonus unit payment. It's $3,000 per unit paid by the state to the municipality. So, for instance, if you have a 200 mixed-use project that's in 2 phases, 100 units is phase 1, that part is permitted. The town is going to get a payment of $300,000 for that, that development. If the second phase has 100 units but hasn't been permitted, you're not getting anything yet. Once it's permitted, then you would get it. So the potential would be a $600,000 payment to the town. So that helps when it comes to like funding different things within the community. The other thing that's interesting is that what happens in a lot of times, particularly in smaller towns, towns that have good school systems, people worry about the extra school costs. So they've done a companion law called 40S. And essentially what it does is it's a reimbursement program if your school costs exceed the amount that would cost to educate students living in the district. So the 40R district, say, this is just really quickly, it's only going to be paid if there's a gap. So if you have $120,000, that's the total cost to educate the kids who are living in that district. So say there's 10 kids in it, the average per pupil cost was $12,000 minus state aid, all that. It would be $120,000. If half the property taxes generated from the 40R, as well as any excise taxes and state aid, only is less, so say if it was $100,000 total, the state would reimburse the town and the public school, actually the school district, with $20,000. So basically, there's not going to be any potential additional taxation on the remainder of your residential tax base. So it's kind of an insurance policy, that's the way we talk about it, should you get more. And what we talk about is that these developments in general attract far fewer school children. You're much more likely to attract school children through single-family development, which is made for larger families.
Do you have to adopt 40S along with 40R?
No,
or does
it's
it come along
automatic.
with it?
It's automatic. It's a companion law that's automatically tied to the 40R. And then what it does every year, there's like there'll be calculations to determine whether or not that's happened.
Is the incentive dollar value already funded, or does it require state
There's
funding in a budget every year?
No, it's in that. But from my understanding, I can talk to Jenny Reid, our chief housing planner. But it's in that trust account for the state. It's a housing trust for the state. So there is money already. It's interesting to note, though, because as I was just saying, very few, these types of developments, more multifamily, small units, attract fewer children. The payments have only ever had to be made, I think, a couple to maybe a few times in the history of the program, which is about a decade old now.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about 40S. So it's like
40R? Yeah, it's also in the housing trust, from what I understand.
I was talking to somebody at the state about that today, and they said that they have never not had enough money to make the incentive payments in that trust fund. So, they've had enough money in it.
Right, well, that was the case with the CPA until they got a lot of adoptions, and they had to start cutting the distributions to individual towns. So that's really what I was interested in.
Yeah, from my
Ultimately,
understanding, it's in a different pool. It's not something that can be like, there's an account that if they don't pull from it, things like that. So, what?
It'd be nice to get that protection, if you could.
So what I was saying, here's like this kind of hypothetical. This was done very generally. There's more specifics that have to be done. But if you took your current village business overlay, it's about 88 acres. That's everything. Some parcels would actually come out of that. But if 20 acres were zoned at 20 units per acre, that would equal 400 units. 20 acres at 12 units per acre, which would be 2 to 3 family. That would be 240 total units potential. 48 acres were done at the single family at 8 acres, that'd be 384. You could have a total of over 1,000 units in that area. That's a lot. You don't even have the market for that. But that's just as an example. So if that was the case, you'd get a $600,000 immediate payment from the state, and then up to $3.1 million for those bonus units as they're built. This could take decades. And as we said, even with what we call our stronger region projections in MAPC, you're expected to have at most 700 more units in the next 15 to 20 years. So that's just something to consider. But that's how the formula works in terms of determining what the incentive would be. This is the key part. So because it is by right, that's why they've incorporated design standards and site plan review. And design standards, they can be very general or they can be highly prescriptive. So these are actually from Kingston, which is more of like a planned urban kind of development. So they were extremely detailed. I mean, it's actually, I would say, as extensive as I've ever seen. But in general, design standards can do anything from the scale, the proportions, exterior appearance of a building, the placement, alignment, width, and grade of the streets and sidewalks. So that's part of what you can do. The type and location of the infrastructure, where the garages and parking is located can be regulated. natural site features and their protection. Also, the design of on-site open spaces, your landscaping, your signage, buffering, the materials of the buildings. Like you can say that they have to be clapboard or brick, that the preference is for architectural shingles as opposed to more standard ones. So that can be built into the design standards so that when it's going through that automatic, because it's by right, it ensures that it's coming to the character. Very similar to what you already have. So these are just kind of some examples from Plymouth, actually. They just have these are the basic, requirements for different areas. And then they just kind of had some graphic images to explain what are meant. So this is a little blurry, I apologize. But, for instance, requiring a sign band between, which is like this little area of the page where the sign would go between the commercial and then the upper floor residential. You can put that into the zoning. Different types of roof pitches, you can require that. It can't be overly prescriptive that it makes it hard to develop or makes it just financially unfeasible or infeasible. So, but these are good examples of it. Others, like Gardner has done one where it's all just written text, but it's very specific. You actually already have, and I just did make a copy of this that people can take. You already have some really good guidelines that are built into your overlay district that does everything from pitch of the roof, facade treatment, setbacks, certain landscaping requirements. So you already have things built in. So that's a real bonus for you because you've already started that process. So anyway, so there's good, this is why the municipality would want to do it. It provides diverse housing options, which are needed. There's incentives and rewards, but there's still control with flexibility. So that's really helpful. The density and scales. It helps to upgrade some of those underutilized sites with more development, which helps with your whole tax base. Higher densities around transit, smart growth, more people will walk, that's helpful. It's changing the use without changing the base zoning, so it's similar to your overlay. This is an overlay district, so you don't have to change your base district zoning. And it can help attract commercial development, and then it is a collaborative approach. Property owners and developers, it's the predictability of it all. It's great. It's not that a site plan or when you have a special permit, that's not going to happen, but it is more hoops to jump through. You have to come back for approvals. There is the constant review. What this does is it adds the predictability that makes development more attractive. And it sends a message actually from the town saying we want the development and this is the type we want. So it's expedited planning and permitting. So the design and density is addressed up front. That's really friendly for the development or the property owner. The infrastructure is already there. You can't have a 40-yard district if you don't have. Actually, you can have the district, but you can't build anything until the infrastructure is in place. So you already have the infrastructure. You're already putting the environmental as well as the community interest in the planning intent, which is great. And then it's collaborative. You're getting community input. You have to go to town meeting to get this approved. So you know that there's a reason why this is happening. And then one of the big, difficult things in smaller towns in particular is the educational impact, but that's already addressed with 40S. So that's not that's not even an issue anymore in terms of that, unless of course you need more space, but in general, school populations are decreasing or holding steady over the state as people have fewer children. So, what we've talked about, Laura and I discussed, so what could you do for like the 40R district? Essentially, you could just have one giant district with all the same regulations. The interesting thing though, so this is actually the current overlay, except we've added the Scituate, is it concrete and pipe property, because that could be something that over time could be redeveloped and would make sense given its proximity, and it's on the train station side, so that makes a lot of sense. So you could do that. Another thing you could do is, as we said, you can have sub-districts. So we talked about in that more conceptual plan, the idea that having the higher density along the driftway on the side of the train would make sense. You could have a mixed-use sub-district here, and then you could have what we would call, just calling this for now, a multi-family sub-district, which would be on this side along Country Way, on the other side of the barrier wall. So that doesn't mean that you can't have any mixed use at all. You could actually you could actually limit it. You could have you don't want as much over there. You could say you could multifamily with a maximum of up to 5,000 or 10,000 square feet of commercial. With over here, you could instead, because you want to have commercial development, you could allow a much higher percentage of it to be the commercial and retail. These are the things you work into the actual 40R district rules and by sub-district. Or you could do even something more specific. You could, if you wanted to really concentrate the 40R, you could do this, higher density mixed-use sub-district here, a multi-family with some, and then you could, you could eliminate this portion, or you could just keep the village business district on that section. The 40R should replace what's underneath it. It would get too confusing to have your base zoning, then a village business, and then a 40R on top. Wherever a 40R district is, that should replace the village business district for this area. So there's difference. So now what it is, it's about understanding what kind of sub-districts do you want? If you go for it, do you want it to be one district, the whole thing? I think the advantage is to really be able to have those sub-districts. For instance, it's going to be, for somebody who's interested in developing, there's far more smaller lots on this size. It's not going to be easy to develop a lot of commercial. Go more with the higher density residential, with if you can get some mixed use. Because this isn't the prime corridor. Where you're going to capture the spending is going to be around here. You've got the visibility, you've got the higher traffic, and you've got the commuters. This makes far more sense. You also don't have the same kind of, like you've got more single families in here, right here. There's more of a buffer here. You've already got this multifamily down here. So it's a transition. I mean, it's more townhouse style, but this would make the most sense. So that's, I believe, let me see what we have. Oh, so for design guidelines too, you could use your existing village business overlay guidelines. You have already the roof pitch, some of the landscaping. Another thing you could do is you could go a little more 40R specific, expand those. Keep many, but build on them. So you give sub-districts, you could differentiate standards between them. Setbacks, heights, dimensions could change a little bit. You could add additional standards like the types of materials. A lot of communities are doing that. It's very simple. If there's a certain type of material that makes, or several, you can't just do one, that would make sense, that would be acceptable, you can write that into the zoning. For instance, we just did some zoning in Marlborough, and it was right downtown. So brick, stone, or certain kinds of concrete were the ones that were acceptable in that area. Here, you might be something more, if you're along the coast, in general, more clapboard, maybe brick, the more traditional, those kinds of materials. You can do that. You can add graphics. You could, like similar to what they did in Plymouth, you can have some simple graphics depicting exactly what you mean. It makes it much clearer to anyone proposing development if they can see those images and what you mean. They can be very simple. They can be just like, kind of graphic in terms of this is how many stories it is, this is how the windows should be aligned, or they can be pictures, just to give them an idea. And that's the presentation on 40R. So I guess now I want to just open up for questions. I do have some handouts, just really quickly, before everyone leaves. This is just links that will provide more information about both the economic development study, but also 40R. There's some really good resources on there. One of them is MAPC itself did several years ago, just about the use of it. Others are about the design guidelines, and one of them is just the actual legislation. I actually have the legislation in hard copy here if anyone's interested as well. I also just have your current guidelines for anyone who's interested to see exactly what's allowed rather than going through your zoning and finding it. And then what I just did is I created a handout here that would be just kind of points to some of the examples of what's in your current design guidelines within that, and then maybe some additions that could be added quite simply actually into it if this does go 40R. So these are just 3 pieces of information that would be good just for people to review afterwards. And then I also have these maps for anyone who's interested. So, sorry, I spoke too fast.
Matt, on the maps, were they reflective of what you had on the slide?
They are. Wait.
Okay. Well, I noticed on that map right there,
yep,
there's a little bit of a discrepancy than what we had gotten. There's a strip right around the Rotary that's zoned residential right now, exactly.
Right here?
Right there.
Yeah.
That is included, and also on the south side of Driftway, which is currently the Jacob Hatch building.
Yep.
So did that get removed, or is that part of the proposal, or?
The shapefile that I have for the village business overlay did not include those parcels. So I don't know if that was just something wrong.
That is correct.
Okay.
But I think we were talking.
They were on the draft map that we gave.
Oh, okay, so I must have missed that when I made the new.
Yeah.
So these would be included right here.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, that I might have to make some, we'll make adjustments when there's a final map. Or I must have just missed it when I was moving the boundaries.
I was just going to say, as far as the mapping, if this does, if people do want this to go forward to April town meeting, which I'm hearing some feelings in that direction, then the decision on where the different sub-districts are really has to be made. If it can't be made tonight, there is a possibility we could shift some things around at the December 18th meeting, but we really should be trying to make that decision as soon as possible.
Yep.
So I'm glad we did invite every property owner in the Greenbush village business district, as well as the property owners that would be affected by this, to this meeting. We sent letters out, put, you know, I hope we put everyone's, yeah, I think we did put everyone's name on them. So it's a little disappointing that we didn't get more people to come, but maybe you can go back and spread the word about this. But I think the locations is one thing that is going to be very important to everyone. Not the only thing, but one of the more important things that needs to be really pinned down.
I think it's important to say too, you don't want to overcomplicate it. You want to make it as easily understandable as possible. So in some ways, I think just from my experience, I would say in some ways this might be the ideal, where you do have that higher density on one side of the train, and then you have more for the mixed use, and then more of the multifamily on the other. It incorporates the entire village business district overlay, but then, so no one's like losing some of that density that's potential for the property, but it does concentrate the highest and the most mixed use on the one side where there's the, from what the market study even identified as holding the greatest opportunity. And it's that way you're creating more of a center, which is more attractive for retail. So basically it's what we call the one park. People can park once and go from place to place, rather than having to constantly get in their car and go from one place to the other. That's really becoming more, even in suburban locations, the more popular types of environments in which people are choosing to live. Obviously at a much lower scale than in like bigger communities, small cities and things like that, but that idea of walkability, particularly around transit infrastructure, is becoming popular throughout the region, even at the end.
Is there anything in the plan for recreation areas, ball fields, basketball courts, tennis courts?
That would not go into the zoning for this. You can have an open space requirement, and then whatever is allowed within that, that's part of it. I mean, there's going to be rules probably about like, you know, pervious versus impervious surfaces, but you can have the open space requirement to do that. And if you can work with even the town or, you know, other, you know, probably those developer comes in to try to work that as kind of agreement, that there will be someone who can do that as well.
So Matt, the two parcels that we talked about, would those be in the pink, the higher density district, just
Yeah,
as
I would
a
think so.
gateway off of 3A, so to speak?
Yeah, I would say the difference would be, would it be Countryway or would it be, so this would be in the pink. Because that would make sense, because the interesting thing is that even though, you know, you've got the wall that comes down here, but it doesn't break the whole feel along the driftway itself. So that would go down here in pink. So this kind of becomes the main, like as you like wrap around into the T parking area, that's where you would really want that greatest density.
Is there, in doing this, is there some notion, and maybe other communities did it, where they're looking at that set of parcels and trying to create sort of an interconnected look and feel, which might include modifications to the roadway and those kinds of things? Is that part of what is being done in these overlay districts, or is it just we rezone it and let happen what happens?
Well, it depends. I mean, you can use 40R in very different ways. Some communities literally use it for one parcel. So if they want something very specific, they'll do a 40R to try to do like literally one parcel. Other communities, Reading, for instance, has quite a large district, and theirs is right in their downtown, and their idea was just to increase some of the densities right around the train station, essentially, from my understanding, and they actually have achieved that. They actually got a project very quickly, and that's actually kind of even, it's interesting, it's shifted kind of where the activity center is now. But what you can do is, and this is when you start with, when you get a large parcel, so say this whole parcel at some point was going to be redeveloped. You can have requirements for when it comes internal circulation and roadways, for how roadways need to be designed in that and how the buildings have to face that. So if you could require, you know, you would use 3 points of egress. So you would, you know, say that it went in like this. You can have that requirement that the buildings have to face that internal circulation, so that you're not, you know, putting like a bunch of driveways off, and you're continuing to promote that more mixed-use environment. You can have things that require your retail spaces to front the street as opposed to in the rear of it. So like, you know, 25% of a parcel can be commercial, whatever the percentage would be in the end, you can require it to be the street facing. So that's another thing. So if you have a deep parcel, for instance, okay, just say this is one big parcel, it's sort of the shopping center, if that ever got redeveloped, you could focus more residential in the rear, and then require some of the commercial up front. It depends on what the percentages are and then what goes into your guidelines.
Right, but those decisions need to be made as part of the zoning
As
process.
you're drafting it. Yeah.
Right, I mean, we don't have the luxury of doing like a special permit to try to lay those things out as of right, right? So-
Exactly, that's why they've incorporated what you can do within within the actual zoning. Typically, most communities, they write the zoning, and then they refer to the design guidelines. So the design guidelines is actually a separate document, but it must meet those. You can use what you currently have, which seems to be working quite well, but you could add some things. You can be as prescriptive as you want. Some communities just, they don't have many design guidelines at all. That's just the reality, because it wasn't deemed as important. If you're trying to go for a certain character, you can have them extremely detailed. I mean, I wouldn't say probably like the Kingston ones, that was a planned development where they did that. It was like one giant program, so they could be very specific. But you can start with what you have, you can amend them at some point.
I think that's something that is really worth exploring, is to get some kind of overall master plan, particularly for the Driftway. Maybe, have a subset be the area where the Driftway and the Driftway come together. But I think you could do something that's kind of in between the zoning and having that master plan, which, we need to fund and, it needs to be produced and so on. For instance, as you're going down the Driftway away from the Rotary, you could easily, somewhat easily create, more of a boulevard effect if you had street trees. For instance, where that medical office building is that has been zoned residential that, would be going into this district. There's a parking lot there with an asphalt sidewalk with absolutely no street trees whatsoever. And if you require them, right along the Driftway, you could get, I think, a lot for your buck out of that. And especially if you did the whole thing continuous all the way up to, the intersection where you go off to the train. So you wouldn't have the whole master plan, but you'd have, some pieces.
Yeah, it just seems like if we're going to do something like this to create, a focal point of development and all that, we ought to think about it. At least, broadly enough so it creates what we expect as opposed to gets built out sort of by pieces and doesn't look like anything.
Exactly. I mean, that's where you can really have, you can have, you can even limit the size of the frontage of, the front, of the building. You can determine that it has to be articulated. So, say if you allowed something over, right now I think it's 50 feet is the widest the building can be. If you decided to go wider, you could have regulations that say every 30 feet it has to change. So, so those things you can add. But in terms of landscaping, for instance, what you were saying for that cohesive feel, you could even, right now, even within your design guidelines, there's actually certain roads that are called out for certain things. You can do that within this as well. So you could say, parcels along the Driftway require, a sidewalk of this length with certain kind of, landscaping along it. You can call out the type of lighting that would be required by the developer as well as a placement, the signage, the location of that signage, so that give that cohesive feel as opposed to just this piecemeal fashion that goes everywhere. I would say what you could do too is that, maybe add something that says about internal circulation. When new roads are constructed, they must have sidewalks, buildings must face the street, they must have a similar setback to the main parcel line. So those are the other things, that the rear of a building cannot face the main road. Those are things you can add. I think what it is that winds up becoming, those are things you can add quite simply. I mean, most communities, I would say, seem to be using kind of a hybrid of what you currently have and something a little bit more detailed. I know MPC worked on sharing guidelines, it's all text, but it is prescriptive of what you can do. When you get into something like the Kingston ones, you're talking a huge budget to do something like that, because it's just, you need a real, I would say, architectural expert, and they can run, 30,000 plus for those kinds of things. And they typically, unless you're dealing with a planned urban development or planned unit development, you don't really need that level. For instance, you're going to already have your density requirements, you're going to have your front setbacks, you're going to have your yard requirements. You'll have certain, if you add materials, that can help, guide things as well. You already have pretty solid, actually, pitch roof and an idea of dormers. So those are things that you can revise a little bit if you choose to, or if they're working right now with the special permit process you've been going through, then you might just want to keep them as they are. I think that's what you have to figure out once you're writing the zoning over the next, if you go over town meeting, obviously the next month or so, really get a good solid detail, or I would say expanded design guidelines. Not significantly, but expanded, and that can be a way to go about that.
Laura, and perhaps it's a two-pronged question, but does this tend to paint, in this particular situation, a more positive picture for development than actually exists? In other words, this development's by right in the 40R district, but it's not totally by right. We still have watershed protection, drinking water protection, offsets from streams,
Yes.
and marshland, all of the things that you would typically have to constrain development in certain areas, still constrain development under this regulation as well.
It's just inappropriately so.
It's more,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just another overlay. So the other overlay is like the Water Resource Protection District for the reservoir. That's still in place.
Right, so I'm looking at this map and saying, there's a lot of fine development potential here, but I think what I'm seeing is a rosier picture that actually exists.
Well, I'm a little more conservative with the incentive number than that, but that's based on talking to DHCD and having them tell me that it's only, that they're going to look at it very conservatively also. So for instance, land that's within that 400 foot of the reservoir, they might not even count that as developable land. And the land within 150 foot of a tributary, they might knock that out of their area calculation when it comes to determining the number of units that could be produced. I think that they're really going to be very tough on us from what I'm hearing. So, yeah, it's still better than, like an empty bank account. So, not that we have that, but it's going to be somewhere, I think, in between 600,000 and zero.
I guess I'm thinking more in terms of putting this out there to the world and saying, world, look at this wonderful opportunity, and not having it quite as wonderful as being a little bit of bait and switch.
Well, I would actually put it a little bit different.
That, yeah, I mean, nothing's ever as good as.
I agree, like when you see the whole map, it looks like, oh, look at this, you could do so much. And exactly, there's certain parameters that things have to come out. So if something's already significantly developed, you can't count that necessarily in the potential unit count. There's like very specific rules. But what you're doing is, rather than like looking at that way, you're basically saying we do want development here. What it allows like a property owner or developer, they can run those initial numbers. They're going to look at what land is actually developable. And then what they're going to say, if that makes financial sense to them, that this is a successful project that could really just in that, that kind of like back of the envelope kind of idea, there's not going to be any impediment for that project happening if they design it within the parameters of which the municipality of Scituate would have already decided for. So that would is the more accurate way. Yeah, this is not a free-for-all where you can just do whatever you want in it. There's still rules that you have to abide by. It's more about, it's taking, and this is drawn right now to current parcel boundaries. So, some of those, if there's wetlands in them, obviously that's going to be taken out. So this was, when I was just showing the numbers, that was just a simple way of saying this is how you could calculate it, but yes, there are things that come out. So, you're very good point, so thank you.
And also, I think the help for developers is kind of incremental. It's not like this is going to change everything overnight. But for instance, if you did require shingles and clapboards on everything, I mean, not necessarily wood, some kind of manufactured wood could be fine, but if you spelled out what you're really looking for, then someone putting a bid on a piece of land would know, okay, it's going to cost me X, Y, and Z, but I will get through the process in maybe 3-4 meetings as opposed to like 10 meetings. And I can budget based on that. So it hopefully would allow someone to make a more realistic offer on a piece of property. But I think it is geared towards developers in that way, making things more predictable and maybe more consistent.
It's the predictability that, most communities that we've worked with, and once they know have adopted it, say that really becomes the selling point. Because it is all written out. And there's not, in most communities, a special permit will be granted if the project is done, in a good way, and that's just the reality. However, what this is, there are instances, and it might be certain ones where it sometimes just, for some reason, it doesn't happen. It doesn't work. So this just gives that predictability for the project. It can be attractive.
It's not as of right for access to things like sewer and all of that.
What do you mean?
In other words, if there's no sewer capacity, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah,
In terms of development, right?
Exactly. In order
The infrastructure has to be there in order to
Exactly.
support it.
Yeah, like you could, for instance, you could actually adopt a 40R district without that infrastructure technically, but until the infrastructure's there, you can't take advantage of the incentives.
And one of the requirements is actually a letter from the DPW director saying that there is sewer capacity. So it's something that's going to be vetted, that's going to be vetted.
Matt, one of your recommendations, I think I heard, was you would sort of get rid of the village business overlay district. I know when we had discussed it before, we had thought about this as just being another option. So how do you weigh in on that?
I think if you do keep the village, it's so similar to the village business district overlay. The only difference really is that there's the 5% more affordability and that it's by right. The problem is that if you keep the village business underneath this, it's just another extra layer that I think it makes it confusing. I think it gets really confusing to the people in town meeting. So basically, I mean, someone could use the underlying zoning and do one thing. They could then do the village business district and go up to 16 units if it gets the special permit. It's almost like it's unlikely that a developer would come in and opt for the village business
Over the
40R,
yeah.
given that it could take a year, technically, however. Whereas with the 40R, once, if they're hitting those parameters, it's going to be more efficient for them. And actually, you could, the densities can be very particular. So, you might even, right now 20 is kind of the max, you might even go up a little bit in your ultimate, like 25 units, just to give that little extra incentive to develop this as the center. So that's just something you can consider. Whereas, for this area, you could keep it exactly as it is, essentially. Maximizing at 20 units, which is really, really the high end you can go. So, but yeah, it's more about just that, as I was saying, don't make it more complex than it needs to be, because I think that's where a lot of times zoning can become an impediment if it becomes highly complex, and it seems like it's going to be a big process. That can be a big turnoff, not only to, honestly, when it goes to town meeting, because people just don't understand sometimes, because honestly, I'm an urban planner, and sometimes zoning, when it gets multiple layers, gets confusing even to us. So make it simple. Make it detailed as you want, but make it simple. The rules should be easy to follow. That would be my recommendation.
Matt, have towns had this in place for how long? It's a relatively new law.
I don't know that the longest. I know some that have had it for many. I mean, I've been working in Reading. I know they've had it since, I believe, 2010 is that what they did, and then they got
so
it.
there's some history to it.
Oh yeah.
And do you actually notice on the ground an increase in activity, an increase in the kind of activity and development you're trying to generate?
Yes, I mean, Reading, I'm going to bring up again because I've just been working there a lot lately. Their district got a 52 unit building right near their train station. It's 4 stories, has ground floor retail. It's interesting, actually, I was doing a market analysis there, and a lot of the feedback we got is that actually, it really did bring a pulse to that area. All the spaces are leased, it's right across from the train station. It really brought it, and that incentive really helped. Bringing that predictability, I think, helped the town.
So let me ask about that. When they set out to put the 40R in that particular area, how much upfront work did they do from a master planning perspective before they laid that out?
That I don't know, unfortunately. I've only been at MAPC for a couple of years, so I don't know what they did beforehand.
Do you see that in the ones that you've been working with? Are there others that are, because this is sort of saying, okay, let's envision the future here.
Oh, I see.
Right? And the issue is, do we need some help in sort of figuring what the alternatives are, even to lay out whether it's right to put density here or there or the other place?
Oh, as you're saying. I think actually, through just having worked in doing these types of projects in general, whether it's 40R or not, and I think going through the economic development study where we really pinpointed that the opportunity within the villages, this is an area that really has the ability to have the density within the town. And
yeah, I'm not saying I don't agree with that. I think that's right, but that's at the 30,000 foot level, and we're talking about zoning down at the 5,000 foot level or whatever, and do we need some sort of help in sort of envisioning how that could lay out to best, support the town, if you will?
Well, I think that's why even with the idea of coming up with these 2 sub-districts where that did, because you really, when it comes to what's the best interest and what's going to work probably the best, that's why, everything that we were during the planning thinking, and just, you've got a train station, automatic activity, at least 2 times a day. The bigger activity during commuting hours, but then sporadically during the day. You know that you've got land available, you know that you've got good access in. So this does make sense for there to be that higher level. And then that's where the support would come from, So it would be the most attractive in terms of, if someone's going to come and do a somewhat larger development in town. Here, in terms of what the benefit is, you're not going to get as much benefit, literally, unless someone comes and puts a ton of parcels together and assembles land. You don't need to do that as much over here because you do have larger parcels. So that's why this would make more sense. You can have the densities, but the parcel size is going to limit the amount of units you can get because based on the square footage of that property. So it would make sense to have higher density, but it wouldn't go be extreme high density in most cases here. I mean, extreme here is 20 units an acre. Whereas here, it would make sense. And so it would help you from, for the analysis we were doing when we just looked at a 3-story mixed-use structure compared to that retail, you really did see from the town's benefit, it would be beneficial from the fiscal and the tax revenue generation. So yeah, I mean, that's part of what we'll be doing in town. We'll be doing when you're dealing with the district. You'll really be thinking through exactly what should be allowed in each place to make sure that you get what you want. I hope I answered that.
We've got a month to do that.
Well, yeah, it's a tight time frame.
Yeah.
We're going to make it to April.
It is.
Any other questions? Can I get a copy of the presentation? Is it available?
Yes, I don't have a hard copy, but I can send a PDF of it.
That works for me.
Tomorrow I can send it to Laura and then she can,
Yeah.
that'd be good.
Yeah.
And I'm always free, I'm open for questions. I have my card, but the easiest way probably is my email address is msmith@mepc.org. So, but I have cards I can put out for anybody who might have questions as well. What's the other question? I do also have a
Would
few
you, could I ask you to follow up with Reddy and just give us some feedback on what they did?
Sure.
Before they took it to town meeting?
Yeah.
I'd just like to understand
Oh, I see.
what kind of process they went
Oh, I see. Yes, I can definitely.
through. Yeah.
I can reach out to their town planner actually.
And you could just try to order, so you can send me.
Sure. Yeah. And I can ask around because we actually did the 40-yard district MAPC for Sharon.
Uh-huh.
So I can ask, like Jenny Raitt would probably have some good information, or Mark Rassicata, who I think actually did that specifically,
Yeah,
but what they
that would
did
be
as
great,
well.
just knowing what they did to work up to
Yeah.
what they submitted.
Sure.
Well,
yeah.
and they may not have had a previous overlay district like we did. And I mean, I think
I
to
don't think
me,
they did.
the simplest thing is to say, oh, we're converting our village business overlay district to a 40R, but that's not necessarily the case because we are expanding this in the process.
Yeah, we're envisioning
And
something different here, and I'm just saying, did anybody do some work ahead of time to do that visioning in a way that was sort of cohesive, before they, because once they set it out in the town meeting, it's locked in, it's as of right? So all of the work we're gonna do is leading up to that.
Yeah, I do think in the Market City, though, as Matt was saying, is they envisioned, if you want to call it the town center, to be at the location of Driftway and New Driftway.
I'm not, that's not what I'm saying, though. I'm not saying that they haven't envisioned that that's what's gonna happen, but that's still at a 20,000 foot level. And the issue is when we lay this out, there will be a set of requirements for what this will physically look like, right? And the question is, do we need any support to lay that out before we take that next
I
step?
was just going to ask, I'm hoping this addresses your question, but I'm wondering if we could get some kind of like a visioning piece for a couple of the parcels, what they would look like, developed under the zoning. And, with the most desirable landscaping parameters, the sidewalks, everything that, that we would want put in there. But if we could get a couple of parcels in a couple of different locations, maybe envisioned that way. And we have a little a little bit of a budget. We've been talking about using it for different things connected with this. Maybe that's something we could do.
Trying to think, I mean, a lot of that, when you get into that kind of level of detail, it actually gets, I don't know that I have, we can do a specific like site plan and the capability right now. I think what you can do, I'm trying to think what would be the best. I understand what you're saying. I think the interesting thing is, how would I put this? That's sometimes where a lot of communities, that's why they include actually examples, like actually photos of buildings in other communities that actually reflect exactly what you're, or very close.
Right, and I'm thinking that, you know, if Reading did that, they sort of, they collected that and put that together, and that was part of what was presented at town meeting or whatever. And it's, you know, everybody can sort of collectively see that vision, right?
I see what you're saying,
As
yeah.
opposed to seeing a map like this, and it's, you know, for most people, it's just blobs on
Oh, yeah, I mean,
paper, you know.
I mean, looking at a map.
HGTV show.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think,
This is what we
We
planned,
need
and
a
this is
house
where it's
app
gonna
for
be.
this.
but I think that would be, even if we do some expanded design guidelines, I think that's something that can actually very easily be, that's really what they did in Plymouth, where they did, and then I've seen it done in, actually, it's not a similar situation, but Brockton. They have some very detailed design guidelines.
But they did that before they went to town meeting.
Well, they're incorporated as part, they're in the actual design guideline document itself that would be reviewed by the town meeting as the design
That's what
guidelines.
I'm saying.
Yeah, oh yeah,
They did
that
all
can be
that
done.
before they went to town meeting.
That's something that we've already talked about, that would be incorporated into any kind of design guideline additions to have that visual representation. Actually, so this little handout right here, what I just kind of put together is on this one column, it's like what your current, some examples of what your design, like just in general, and then if you built them up, one of the things I've shown, actually, let me just do this. I'm going to just bring this over, is on the second page, for instance, and anyone can get this, but you can, for the different parameters, so this is under what we'd say setbacks. You can have diagrams within it that show this is how far we mean, this is what we mean. Then they also included pictures. These actually pulled from Brockton just as examples, but they show what we mean, what they mean by that. When it comes to like facade design, if you incorporated that, so for instance, right now it's mostly the treatments like awnings and canopies, and then the percent that has to be windows or glazed. You can add everything from the preferred materials, the articulation. This could be text, but you can also like have nice descriptive images from somewhere else that show what you mean.
Yeah, no, that sounds great.
Okay, that's
I'm
really.
just not the one who could do that.
But the issue is, how do we come up with that and have something that we
We've talked
like
about.
and are willing to live
Exactly.
between now and town meeting?
Well, and that's my question is that, right now, we already have very skeleton of design standards for the village business overlay district. If we just basically change to the 40R and we have the map, and we have the existing design guidelines that we already have, is it potentially possible at another town meeting in the fall that we actually revise not the map, but the actual design standards or design conditions?
You can
get
adopt it
people to
for
vote for it.
referring. What?
And if we can get people to vote for it.
Right.
I think regardless, I mean, I think you have a couple options. You could go for town meeting in April, and I would actually go probably develop some slightly more specific than what you have now as that bridge. And then you could do further design guidelines if warranted, but you can see how far you can get, what can be agreed upon, and see if that works for the community and is voted, if it works for you, and then first selectman, then goes to town meeting and then is voted upon. That's a good strategy to do that. I do think visuals help, whether they're an image from somewhere similar, but that show those certain elements that you're talking about, so that people can envision exactly what you're talking about. Not just the developers; they're going to get it in general. They're going to understand materials. They're going to understand what the certain heights of the first floor need to be. They're going to understand the pitch so that the community understands. I think that's very important. So I do think those are things that can be done.
I think you might want to consider the possibility of basically a road trip. Go to Reading and see what they have. Go down to Plymouth and see what they have. Take a few pictures. Go to Sharon. See what you can, what
Belmont did one.
and Belmont, what have you, so that if we could.
That's the result though, Ann. And what I'm thinking about is,
How did they
what
get
did they
there?
do to get to that result?
And that if we
right?
can get a hold of that
So if we can
paper,
get that piece.
if we could
that
get
would
the
be helpful.
paper that they
Not what they
said,
ended up with, the thought process that got it.
right.
That got in there, yeah.
Well,
Right.
we're
I
already,
mean, maybe what we see that actually got developed, we didn't really like.
Well,
And we want to know what that
No.
thought process was that got them there,
But
right?
if we
'Cause we
can
don't
get
want
a
to repeat
hold
that.
of what they presented to town meeting,
Right.
that, if we could get a hold of the paper.
Yeah. And I imagine, talking to the town planner there, you could get
The
a
articles.
sense for the process they went through to produce those papers that they presented at town meeting. That's really what I'm saying.
Okay, but I think too, if it's at all possible, it would be nice to.
Yeah, I'd love to see what they actually
What they
presented.
ended up with.
Well, and at the MAPC design charrette that happened, I guess maybe a year ago or earlier, there was this visioning statement, like, you know, they had all kinds of pictures on the table, you know, hundreds of pictures. And it was like, what is your vision for North Scituate? What's your vision for the harbor? What's your vision for Greenbush? And they came up with, people had an input of what they thought Greenbush could be. So that's at least a starting point.
Sure.
And specifically noted what, why they liked each image.
Yeah. If I remember right, there was like a, you know, they talked
So
about
where
a
is all
clock
that?
tire, a clock
It's on the
tower,
EDC
brick.
website.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was more, what am I trying to say?
There were already
Because
images.
there's a pretty wide range of directions to go. I mean, and, you know, one of them is clapboard and the other one is brick. I mean, those are two sort of opposite poles, perhaps. I'm
Or
thinking of
shingles.
Downtown Newburyport, for example, which is a wonderful brick environment. You won't see a shingle or a clapboard in Newburyport Village.
And you're laying it out
Is
for
that what
walking,
we- is that
so
what we
what does
want?
that need to look like?
Yeah,
Are you
is that
laying it
what
out
we
for
wanna do?
bicycles?
I
Does
wouldn't
that
want
need
to
to look
something else.
I wouldn't want to prescribe the materials too specifically. I'd want to leave it open, but yet,
No prefab metal buildings though?
yeah, exactly. You know,
No, that's okay too.
Unless they're plain.
I'm just saying that there's decisions that need to be made on many different levels.
Absolutely.
And that's a good decision too, to leave it open.
I think also you
Trust-
probably want to look at what's existing already. I mean, you drive through Greenbush, you don't see a lot of brick anywhere.
Right.
You know, you see one building that has sort of a stucco concrete thing going on, but most of the buildings
It's
are
mostly clapboard.
clapboard.
Right, and maybe that's
So-
Situate's image as opposed to Newburyport's.
Or
I mean, I don't-
Greenbush's image.
Or Greenbush's image.
Cedar-
That's actually
cedar
an
shingle.
important point. Yes,
Yeah.
what's the image you want for Greenbush?
I think that's the more important thing, yeah.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. It's just I don't have an answer to that question.
Exactly.
And
I kind of hate to not hear from the people from Greenbush who are here, if they have any thoughts about this at all, through Bill.
Well, this is an easier process to get through the guillotine of the process of getting an approval, and this is what the setbacks are and the height restrictions. I mean, your height restriction is even greater than the height restriction that currently I'm aware of, 35 feet versus 40 feet. Doesn't sound like much, but it is. And, you know, up to 3.5 stories as opposed to just 2 stories. That's a big difference too. So,
And that might be appropriate for this kind of density we're looking
Yeah.
for, right? I mean,
Right,
that could
exactly.
be
Yeah.
perfectly fine.
Exactly.
So,
right.
In fact, if you're talking, you might get some motion.
Right, yeah. At least have some attic space on top of
Yeah.
the second floor with a nice
With the
pitch.
pitched roofs.
Right, exactly.
And dormers and.
Or even a roof deck.
I like the idea of having more affordable housing in the area, and I like the idea of having housing near the train, but I don't want to end up with, I live on Jenkins Place, and that has a lot of single-family houses, and I don't want to end up with something where we all get forced out from a very nice neighborhood. So I like the idea of the red, where the red is, with the higher density. And I will be very interested in learning more about what would be for the greener areas.
Anything else?
I mean, how do you put the parcels together? I mean, it's hypothetical, right? All of this is really hypothetical. I mean, unless you actually have parcels of land, you know.
But,
Well, if you have,
They're all
say,
individual
10,000
zones, right?
square foot
Yeah.
parcel, if you're doing 20 units per acre, then that means, you know, that means four or so units. So The affordability only kicks in if you have 13 or more units. So if you had a 10,000, 12,000 square foot parcel, you could put, you could put 2 duplexes on it, for instance, which you can't do now. Now you can put 1 single-family home on a 12,000 square foot parcel. So this would immediately open up the options. Even if you didn't want to do a big mixed use, it would open up options even for someone wanting to do something relatively, I don't want to say modest, because none of this really sounds like modest to a single-family homeowner, but, a lot less involved than a big mixed-use building. So there'd be more options for the property owner who just owns a 12,000 square foot lot.
I think that it's also why this area was sort of singled out as the higher density. The parcels are bigger. So those larger projects would be more of a natural fit over here because you already have that size. And some of these, on a map this size, this doesn't look like a particularly huge lot, but it's a pretty sizable lot. Whereas here you do see that it's much more fragmented and it's smaller. So you're not going to get the same kind of density just naturally by lot. Someone would have to assemble those parcels. So that means they'd have to work with multiple. That's why when we were looking at the it's in one of the appendices, but we started trying to group some parcels that might work, but it was really hard to do over there because if you have to get 3 or 4 owners, it all has to happen relatively quickly. You have to all agree. If one person holds out, that stops that one bigger parcel. So that's why, fortunately, where you have the more likely area based on kind of preferences, the access to the train, the traffic, the parcels are here. So it's actually more of a natural fit, even in the way that we're looking at it. So that was one of the reasons. One place where there's some larger parcels is actually like right here. And actually they were just talking about that in the previous meeting, or the previous. So, that's just when we look at it. But that's the problem, that's the issue with zoning, no matter where you are. Even in like a large city, if you're in an area where there's really small lots, you're not going to be able to get that big parcel. However, there's likely you're going to get much more density in the city, so there might be an appetite to assemble many parcels over the course of several years. Here, you're probably going to find people who are going to go mostly first for those larger parcels, and then if the market really heats up, then it would be a different source.
So if this gets rezoned to 40R, or whatever, we get the 40R district, does that mean that the 50 Country Way then becomes eligible for the incentives?
Not the way things are, not unless they reapplied as a 40R. I mean, you have to apply with the 40R bylaw in place to get the incentives. I mean, he was kind of talking about that in an offhand sort of way. I don't have any idea if he was serious.
Can we get a waiver on that? Since we already have a village overlay district that is encouraging the same thing.
If somebody at the state could be
That's something to look into
but
actually, because for instance, I think in Kingston, they actually did the 40R specifically to a planned development. That was already
yeah,
proposed.
but they probably didn't have the application.
Oh, that's probably, yeah. That is.
Because they,
it was like pre-application.
The arduous process you were talking about is about a year.
Yeah.
In fact, it's actually been longer than that.
Let's cut a deal now before we pass it then.
There are time limits within 4 years. It has to be approved. Once it's submitted, it has to be approved within a certain amount of time. You get the exact dates, but it's not a year.
I think we need to file a waiver request.
90 days, I believe. I'm not sure exactly, but there is a time limit.
Why not? All right.
What is the section in Boston?
I'll get Matt to help me write.
Just put in a new train station, and the people are very concerned. They're not, they're renters, and suddenly their rents are going through the roof.
Is this in Dorchester?
No.
Not Somerville.
Probably Somerville.
No, not Somerville.
No, Somerville, that's all new.
What is it?
Somerville's going right.
Reeville, I think
Oh,
so.
Reedville, it might be. That's so
And-
close to the Dedham line.
They've been very active about gentrifying that area, and then all of a sudden, I understand exactly what you're saying.
I grew up in Scituate, I want to stay in Scituate.
Right.
I don't want to end up getting forced out.
Right.
That's,
And
I
it
think this
is,
is going to help.
but that's
It
one thing
will.
that's good about 40R is that within that 40%, 20% of those units do have to be affordable units. So there is some of that protection already brought in. And that's what particularly becomes important, particularly people, it's really important for younger people, for, a lot of times, as we like to say, like when you're hitting that 80% AMI, area median income, you're talking a lot of times about your teachers, you're talking about people on a fixed income. So, that means that you do have those units.
Well, not only that, this is going to bring revenue could help in the tax base
Yes.
Scituate too, right?
Mhm.
And we need all the help we can get.
Well, particularly, you are, like every community, I mean, every community in the region, this is like a regional, issue, is that, the population is aging. There's going to be a lot more services in every community that are going to be, so any kinds of revenue that you can generate that can even help, really shrink that gap of funding is really helpful. I think one way to think of 40R though, because you already have your overlay, it's really a replacement for it. It's not that different. It's just that you're going to be allowing it by right with those design controls built in. So the more, when you're comfortable with certain design guidelines, you have certain ones that are already guiding it to a certain direction. If there's certain things that have not been, I would say, in favor in general, think of what those have been. What from the communities are things that you wouldn't want to see. That can also help. So think of those, as much as you want to see what you want to see, is there something that would really not be welcome here? That might, in terms of the design. So that you can also incorporate so you make sure that the design guidelines have that. But they have to be reasonable. Like they can't be something that basically makes it almost impossible to, build on a lot. And actually what Laura was saying, for a smaller lot, if you have a lot that can accommodate that can accommodate 14 units, which would put you into the affordable category, but you only designed to build 8, that's actually not allowed. You do have to, if you can reach the density for the affordable unit, you have to do it. For a 40R, you can build with the underlying zoning, whatever's allowed. So you could do 4 units, in a certain way. I think that's what's allowed in that district for at least the general business. So you can still build what's allowed in the underlying, but the 40R is the overlay, which provides the additional uses, similar to what's
So you
happening.
have to max out the density on
As long as
every lot?
you can't specifically try to build around the law.
Oh, okay, well,
That's what I mean, yeah.
I wanted to also get back to the Jenkins Place question, because I remember that coming up when the Village Business Overlay District was done. And I think, I don't know that the planning board would have a strong desire to rezone that particular area if the people in that area didn't want to be included in this district, because a lot of those lots are particularly small. There's some 5,000 square foot lots in that area and smaller. There are some 20,000, maybe there's one 20,000, but it's kind of down the road. There's not like through access. So, I think there are a lot of issues that have to be worked out about the actual location of the district, and that's one of several of them.
I think that's why the design guidelines are important too, because scale, it's interesting, actually even when you were talking about the meeting, the images that people tended to select were, I would say, have design elements that make something that's quite dense look less dense. So when you have those pitched roofs and those dormers, or if you have to break up, the articulation of the building has to be broken up to maybe even appear as several buildings as opposed to even though it might be one, it really does have an impact on the overall feel of the neighborhood. So you can have some single families adjacent to actually a smaller multifamily unit that are very contextual and really do fit together. So that's why you really that's why I think the pitch is really important in particular in these kinds of situations, because a pitched roof makes something look smaller. The way it reaches into the sky essentially, because it's a gradual rather than a flat roof that might hit the same level. Like if you have a flat roof at 35 feet and a 35 feet with a pitched roof, it's really, it's going to be starting at probably more like 28 feet that it's starting to go up. So that's just something to consider, and that's why the design guidelines are important.
Real quick question, Matt, on the outline. I mean, in general, I think the potential 40R, the way that it's shown here on the map with the additional parcels that we talked about, is a very good representation. I was just curious why, or what the thought process was about the transfer station, if you thought about including it as part of the 40R, or you just thought, because I assume that parcel's split with the landfill, right?
Honestly, I think that would be really smart to include it, if there's a location for that to go elsewhere.
Well, I'm not saying there is there's probably not, I'm just saying potential.
Yeah, if there's potential, the thing is, you can also expand the district later in time.
Right.
Like if you adopted this as your first step, you could always, in a future town meeting, say, okay, we've identified a place, let's really build on this, this concentration, and let's, take this chunk and add it in. You could do that. Or we could do it now. It's totally up to, what the boundaries are desired by the community, and that's how you can do it.
More likely the landfill after the settlement is all complete.
Well,
25
the
years from
easy,
now.
that's like the non-landfill part of the landfill.
Right.
Solar panel too.
That's a really interesting idea. No abutters that,
Coming back.
Well, that's kind of why this is ideal too, because there really are no abutters, so you're not having that direct impact on the highest density area that you would in other places.
I think we got to wrap this up. We're over our time.
Thanks.
So we'll be working on some of these questions and,
So if you have questions, you can either bring them back to Laura or bring them back to Matt.
coming up maybe with some more visuals and,
Matt, do you think it's feasible to go back to the HCD or wherever we have to go back to talk about sort of an exemption on the, if the 40R gets passed, you know, this new 30 unit that we're putting in?
My understanding is
I'm honestly not knowledgeable enough to answer that question, but that would be a question. If there's certain questions you have that are specific like that, if you could either email me directly, you know, I'll just give you all my card. That's fine, and then I can put that in front of Jenny Raitt, who really is probably our expert in this. So that I could do, and then, or if you want to, you know, gather them all at once and then send a new document, that would be fine as well. So, oh, sorry, let me just make sure that
Okay, thank you.
is the visualization that we were talking about of individual parcels in different areas and what they might look like, did that answer some of what you were looking for?
Oh, good.
Or was it really more of an overall view of, like when you're in Google Earth, going down Driftway, how's it going to look different?
So here, this is
Well, I think the
this is probably the most
visualization of
realistic
the
one.
kinds of development
So,
we'd like to
yeah,
see
so I
is
just
helpful,
marked
right? I
it
mean,
as just a plan
that's
for
kind of
right
helpful.
now, and then-
But at the end of the day,
Yeah, I'm
if
really
what
visual.
we're talking about is envisioning a different look and feel of this village center, right?
There's three.
What
So
is
there's
that
just
look
like
and feel,
how those
and what are we
different
trying to
options.
accomplish? And are we going to accomplish it just with buildings, or are we going to accomplish it with
So there's just
streetscapes?
examples of what you could
Are we
do.
going to accomplish it
But-
in landscaping, and are we
Yeah,
going
that's
to
probably
make
the
it
least likely
integral all the
not to-
way? I mean, I think about the Hingham Shipyard,
Some
what they
districts
did
and
there,
other
right?
great things about it.
It's sort of interesting in one way, but I think in another way it actually,
you know,
you know, they put this massive parking lot right in the middle of everything, right? So all the houses on one side and all, you know, all
If you want to get the
of mixed
incentive,
use,
like this might make the most
you know,
sense.
is
to
on the
do all
other
of
side.
this.
It's a long way from one place to
Where's
another.
Jenkins?
You know, that was done with a lot of visioning and everything else, right? So I don't know the answer, I guess. That's my problem.
What I heard,
If you look at Hingham Center and all of the streetscape improvements that were done there with the MBTA mitigation money, and if you think about the Driftway,
It is, it's very barren.
Oh, I do.
Right, and so what is the, way to do that? You talk about mixed use and walkable and bikeable communities, right? What are the other elements you need to integrate into that to make it, can you come all the way down the Driftway and drive up to wherever the center is going to be, right?
I
On a
think I
bike
heard Laura
or
saying
walk.
that not to do a complete master plan, but you could do a subset.
Yeah, I don't think we need a master plan per se, right?
Yeah, of Greenbush, which was, you know, what was that done? 2002, the village study. There was a study of Harbor, there was one.
It's always like
But something, you could do something like that.
I know, the problem is whatever you do,
Let's bring it back.
you're locking it in, right, in the
Who wants to give them this?
Okay, one last question, that's all I'm gonna say, is where's 107 Driftway? I saw in the paper that it sold for 13 million. I'm wondering if that was a typo.
That was the golf course.
Are you serious?
I'm kidding.
Yeah, I'm paying it off a round at a time.
I just was like, I
You
saw
must
that.
almost be there.
Because, you know, in the Mariner, they always list all the transactions, and it was 107 Driftway, 13 million.
I have no clue.
No idea.
It's not that
So
MBTA
research
parts
find
of
out.
it.
10 new Driftway is a good patch, but I don't know if it was, sorry, yeah, that's the only, that's the one of the biggest buildings that we have.
It's not the MBTA parcel. Yeah, I wouldn't.
I thought it was 6.
Maybe it's 1.3, or I don't.
I wondered if it was a typo. But anyway, just to let you guys do research on it.
Let's get the rest of this meeting over with, guys.
The next item on the agenda is public hearing for accessory dwelling, 253 Hadley Road. Somebody here for Hadley Road?
Yes.
You're up.
Look at is the accessory dwelling is everything the same.
Over the seat in the front, tell us what you want to do.
Excuse me?
This is, pull up a seat in the front. Where does this come from? Tell us what you want to do.
Oh, I was wondering why.
My name is Brian Marcella, I'm Marcella and Sons, I'm here to represent the homeowner Diane Downs. We're building a one-story in-law apartment on 253 Hadley.
Let's go right where the foundation's being put in now.
Excuse me, sir?
We go right, it's going in where the foundation is being put in now.
Yes. It's an addition onto the existing
Yep.
dwelling.
Can you, I was having trouble following this, where the actual addition was. Can you sort of lay it out here? Is this,
That's the plan. This whole thing is the addition right here.
Yeah.
The
house itself
is
is
actually,
Above the screen.
okay, can you go back to the, it's actually smaller than what it is here. It says 26 by 32, we made it smaller, 26 by 29.
so it's this footprint right here is
That's the existing house, and
Okay.
this is the footprint here.
So where is this on this?
This is it right here, so it's gonna be a
This
one-story.
piece right here,
yes.
this gable end piece?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It
I
has
had
a,
trouble
it
figuring
has
that out.
a rear access to the outside, and the front access is into the main house.
So this is the front, there's the front door for the
That's
main
the front
house.
door, yes, and there's a doorway right here coming in.
Uh-huh,
The door is, the unit accesses the house from the inside. There's a rear entrance exiting the outside.
and that's this here?
Yeah, right here, coming out the outside.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
What are the sizes of the accessory dwelling in the main building?
It's just,
29 times 26.
1496 existing and 650 for the in-law.
That's 40%.
It's more than 40%.
It is, but it's
You
less
get
than
in
the seven,
because of
it's less than the
these
750. That's the bylaw, current bylaw.
Yeah, whichever's greater, right?
Yep, 6. Well, I always forget. It's 29 by 26?
it is 25 by 29.
25 by 29.
It's also got a little chunk taken out of it, which looks like it's 4 by,
It's actually, it's 6 by 7
6
feet.
by 7 feet.
Oh, where the upper right porch?
Yeah,
Where the door
where
is.
the little entrance is.
Okay, so it's something like 675 square feet. So it's definitely under the 750.
Have you had a chance to look at it, Laura?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, just in terms of the area and the parking also, it looks like it's going to be fine because they have a wide driveway. And, yeah, we've done some research
Is
into
it
this.
on sewer or is it?
It's town sewer, yes, sir.
Okay. So does this get separately sewered or is it all through the main?
The whole
house?
unit is gonna be ran off the same utilities as the house. It has its own,
So it is for specifically one of the reasons that an accessory dwelling gets built for that I think is, myself, is probably one of the best reasons, which is to provide for an adult or child related to the owner, you know, so that they can take care of that person. That's,
exactly. what it should.
seems to me that's what an accessory dwelling should ideally be.
That's exactly what it should
That's what it's supposed to be.
And just on the elevations, it clearly,
I know, exactly.
I agree, and it
should
clearly
change
looks
those
supportive
bylaws,
too.
Steve.
Well, they can be rented to anybody. It doesn't have to be.
No,
Right,
correct.
it can be.
The present
multiple
use or the
things.
presently intended use of this one will be for that.
So from an egress point of view, is it okay to have the second means of egress through the main house?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because your entrance is usually can be through the main house, and your second means of egress can be somewhere else.
Is that the one we did just, what was the one that was the accessory dwelling, but didn't?
The one
It's on
over on
Arbor Way.
Arbor Way.
Yeah.
Arbor Way.
Arbor Way has,
Did they have the same thing?
Yeah.
remember you came down like this little hallway, came in and you went
Yeah.
to the left. you went-
But there was a
Practically
door
went
that
through
you
the
go through,
Yeah.
right?
From the new
From the
addition,
outside.
from the new addition to the front door, it's roughly maybe 15 feet. And it's basically another small living room. And the front door is right there.
I think you want to try to have that entrance so people can come and go without having to walk through somebody's apartment.
Well,
But unless you have it set up for a
she
special
has it
reason,
set up for that
because,
reason for
you
mom.
know, that's how you want it to be.
Yeah.
Right.
And the main access from the driveway would be that door in the back there. So the driveway's in the back.
Oh, does the driveway go down the right side of the house then? Or
It's
the
it's
side
in
of the house?
It's on the
whatever?
side, it's a corner lot,
Uh-huh.
so the driveway is on the back side of the house.
Oh,
So that's their
I didn't realize that.
basically their main entrance to
They
the
come in from the
dwelling.
back.
well, that makes it more explainable.
And you didn't bring a plot plan as part of this set.
I do.
This one right here for, yeah, there's a site plan.
I have a
Oh, I'm
plot plan.
sorry.
Oh, here it is.
Sorry.
Oh,
yeah,
See
I
it
got it.
there?
We're gonna revise the plot plan also, we just have another opportunity to do with this
Trying to
sketch.
make it smaller.
It still has
But this is
the,
it right here,
it
which means.
still has the largest size on it, so we're gonna
The
revise
driveway
this and have it
must be
changed.
right there. It's right here.
And I will furnish a copy for you when we do that.
So from Dayton Road, you need setbacks. From Hatherley Road, you don't, but you're set back more than the pre-existing condition.
This is
So
actually
the driveway
3'6".
Here's the garage, right?
So
they come
it's
this
showing
way.
a setback of 2 feet, and
Yeah.
it's set back 3'6".
Yeah.
So where's the driveway, I'm sorry?
The driveway is, this is the garage here, the driveway is right in
Right there.
front of it. It's
Okay.
roughly 2 parking spots, and that's basically all they need for Mom and Mrs. Downs.
Okay.
It looks like there'll be room to put in another parking space if you really need it.
Yeah, I mean, you're supposed to have 2 for each unit, but it looks like you've got plenty of space
Good,
to
it is
do
good,
that.
put 2 in the
Yeah,
garage.
We
and
can
2
put
outside.
cars in it because it's
Yeah,
shorter, but it's long. So we can
Yeah,
fit
I'd say that probably-
3 cars across.
Yeah,
We could
okay.
put 3 more
Plus,
cars.
it's a 2-car garage. There's a 1 door on there, but it's big enough for 2 cars.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a question. And I know I've been away for a while, but this has always been sort of a pet peeve of mine. This is an accessory dwelling that is connected to the house. You're using the same water. Are you putting in a new water meter?
No.
No. And the sewerage is going to go through the house?
Everything is fully connected with the house.
All right.
All the
And I
services.
just don't understand why we continually say a new water service is required for accessory dwellings for a fee of $6,500. Do we waive that?
We
That
can.
would be up to the water
not our-
department.
Yeah, the
I
DPW.
don't have a dog in that hunt.
Well, you know what, we should have a dog in that hunt, because this is onerous. When they're not putting in, I can understand if a new meter were going in. I can fully subscribe to that. But if a new meter is not being placed, and it seems to me that the water department has in fact waived it, but I'm wondering, why is it still part of the general information?
Have they waived?
Don't know that.
I don't know if
It's
they
been
waived it.
required for a
Yeah, the
long
water
time.
I know,
I
and
can
I-
find out if it still is, because I honestly
I don't know that.
haven't spoken with
Maybe one of them
anybody
they
for a
have.
long time about it.
Well,
so
I have.
Are you saying another meter for the new
A
addition?
new water service is required, this is in the permit.
Okay.
So you're saying you talked to Jim
I-
Barrows or somebody and he's not requiring it anymore?
Well, I know that when I was involved, not involved, but sitting in on my neighbor across the street for an accessory apartment, he said that no, they weren't going to require it. But I just think that this is something that we need to consider for accessory apartments if they're connected to the main portion of the house.
Yeah, but
But
I
how
certainly,
do we?
I don't even know what.
We don't have any
Water
way of-
department does their job.
Yeah, no way of doing it.
But what would be the process, the mechanism?
I mean, it seems to me the new water service is really a function of whether you want to independently meter and let somebody else pay the bill as opposed to you pay the bill and
That's what
they
I'm
pay
saying.
you. And that seems to be a homeowner's choice,
For a
not
while, it was
ours.
kind of a red herring where they were requiring everybody who had an accessory dwelling to put in a new water service. And they were charging them for it. And I don't really want to editorialize about it, but it was
stopped.
expensive. If it has stopped, then we'll just take the language off the application, that's simple.
I think it's appropriate for the water department to look at it and say, okay, we got a water line coming into this house, we just added, a certain amount of use to it. Is it sized properly? If it is, then it really becomes whether independently they want to meter it differently or not, right? And I think that becomes the accessory dwelling owner's decision, right, at that point. Because you have to deal with it otherwise. If you were to rent it out to somebody,
If you were gonna rent it.
you'd have to deal with the cost of that somehow, right? But they could just pay you for whatever excess water it was, right?
The reason the language was on there was people were finding out later that they had to pay the $6,500 fee. And rather than find out at, when you went to get your building permit, this was kind of like an early warning device. So people would see early on that, oh my goodness, on top of constructing this whole thing, I'm gonna have to pay $6,500 for a water connection fee. So that was the purpose of having it on the application. But if they're not, if you're not doing it anymore, we certainly can take it off the application.
I'm not disagreeing with you, by the way. I think you're absolutely correct. It's onerous and it shouldn't be there.
Right, the purpose of an accessory apartment is to aid the homeowner, to allow a family member or whatever, and to, maybe I'm editorializing, but to add a
You got
60.
the quieter, Richard.
Then I'm shut up.
Yeah.
It's not just a family member, it can be to get additional income, so it can be to rent it.
It could be.
So it could be to isolate the utilities from one side to the other.
If that's the case, then I
And if they choose to
agree.
do that, then they could,
But
they
having been
should
doing
have
this
to
for a
pay for
while,
another
it's
meter,
always
right?
been that when you came in with an accessory dwelling, regardless of whether it was attached or detached, it was always a separate water meter, $6,500, whatever.
The editorial part that I sort of suppressed was that the $6,500 seems like an awful lot.
But
Well, if they're putting a new water meter, a new line in or something,
That's one thing.
right, that's one thing,
But if they're not,
But to require it does seem kind of crazy.
yeah, but
So
unfortunately, we're not the
is
water.
it not required? Is that something that we can,
I think you need to talk to the water department, because you're not
Well,
putting in a
or-
new meter.
since we weren't
Or
expecting that?
don't talk to them unless they send you a bill.
Yeah, that might be-
Because you might never get the bill.
Yeah, that's unexpected for us.
Anyway,
That's
we have a
not-
motion.
We weren't planning on that, so how does that work? You can walk us through it.
I'm sorry?
So in regard to the water meter, how does that work now at the stage that we're in now?
I guess I would talk to the water department, go down to the water department where they do the water bills and just ask them what you're going to be required to pay.
And because you're not putting in a new water meter and it's all being, and see, if you have increased water usage and the pipe sustains it, they're paying, more for the water in terms of usage. The same thing is true of sewer.
Right. It's not like you're getting away scot-free. You're
Right.
still going to pay for the water.
Right, you're paying
We're
for
also
the-
talking about a 650 square foot apartment. It's really just for one person.
I fully
There's not a lot
understand,
There's not a lot of water use that's going to be in that.
but it's just,
Maybe they'd be willing to waive it if they are charging it for people.
So you don't,
I just
you
don't
don't
even-
know if they are charging them.
I don't even know where the requirement is, other than, I think Ann's pointed it out because it's on the.
It was on the application.
Right,
right.
but I don't know
And this has been-
where it spells that out.
In the many odd years that I've been on and off the planning board, it has been a pet peeve of mine from the video.
And you haven't fixed it yet?
I've worked on it. I had to go around it, selectmen, and failed.
Well justified.
All right, anything else?
All right, do we
Need
have
a
a
motion?
motion?
Yep, okay. I move to make the following findings of fact on the accessory dwelling special permit, 253 Hatherley Road. Number one, according to the town of Scituate Assessor Records, the property at 253 Hatherley Road is owned by Diane M. Downs, trustee. The property is located in the residential R3 zoning district on a lot of 10,000 square feet. Number 2, on November 12, 2014, Diane M. Downs applied for a special permit for an accessory dwelling within a single-family house on property at 253 Hatherley Road. Number 3, according to the plan, the floor area of the primary dwelling is 1,496 square feet. The floor area of the accessory dwelling, as shown on the plan dated August 4th, 2014, is approximately, did we say 675 or let's say 650?
Yeah, I'd say 675, just to be, I don't know, but the numbers
It's
that
still
we
under
just talked
750,
about
so-
now, I'd say, maybe we just say less than 750 square feet.
Okay. The plan dated August 4th, 2014 is less than 750 square feet. The floor area of the accessory dwelling will be less than 750 square feet, and it meets the size requirements of 530.2F of the zoning bylaw for accessory dwellings. Number 4, the accessory dwelling will blend with the architectural style and is of similar materials to the existing primary dwelling. Number 5, the accessory dwelling is under 750 square feet in size and has 1 bedroom. It is subordinate to the primary dwelling. Number 6, the proposed plan shows the dwelling to have a 1-car garage. Outside the garage, there is room for 3 parking spaces in the driveway. This appears adequate to provide 2 parking spaces for the accessory dwelling and ample parking for the primary dwelling. Number 7, the applicant has submitted a signed, notarized statement that she will live on the property. The special permit will be recorded. Any future new owner will need to file an affidavit with the planning board that he or she occupies the property. Number 8, the property is on town sewer. Number 9, 1 accessory dwelling unit is contained on the lot in a single-family house. It will be a separate housekeeping unit. Number 10, there are no new exterior stairs. Number 11, the application meets the standards of the Scituate zoning bylaw for an accessory dwelling special permit. Those are the so we want to vote on the findings.
First, yeah.
Yep.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Now I have another one. Shocking. Hold on to your hat. I move to approve the special permit for an accessory dwelling at 253 Hatherley Road with the following conditions. Number 1, the applicant shall meet all requirements of the building department, the Board of Health, Department of Public Works, the Fire Department, the Water Department, and other town agencies. Number 2, except for any changes necessary to meet these conditions, any construction shall conform to the plans entitled Downs Residence, 253 Hatherley Road, Scituate, Massachusetts, 02066, dated August 5th, 2014. Elevations, first floor plan, and existing second floor plan, as well as the building location plan for 253 Hatherley Road, dated June 6th, 2014. Number 3, the property at 253 Hatherley Road shall contain a maximum of 2 dwellings, the primary dwelling and the accessory dwelling as proposed. The footprint, number of bedrooms, and/or square footage of the accessory dwelling shall not be increased without prior approval of the planning board. The number of bedrooms in the accessory dwelling is limited to 1 in the location and size indicated on the first floor plan submitted with the application and attached to this decision. Number 4, a plot plan shall be submitted to the planning board prior to obtaining a building permit to verify that the square footage of the accessory dwelling is less than 750 square feet as shown on the architectural plans. Number 5, the owner of the property shall reside on the property as long as it contains an accessory dwelling unit. An accessory dwelling special permit certification of ownership and occupancy from any new owner shall be completed at the closing of the sale of the house, and a copy provided to the planning board within 7 days. Number 6, the planning board will require an on-site inspection for conformance to the approved plans and these conditions prior to a certificate of occupancy being issued for the accessory dwelling. Number 7, no on-street parking shall be permitted at any time. Number 8, this special permit shall be void if it is not recorded at the Registry of Deeds within 90 days of the date of filing with the town clerk. The owner shall provide proof of this recording to the planning board. Number 9, the special permit shall lapse within 2 years from the date of its issuance unless substantial use or construction has commenced prior to that time in accordance with Mass General Law. Chapter 48, Section 9. Number 10, the planning board reserves the right to review compliance with this special permit at any time. At the request of the planning board, an affidavit shall be provided that either the primary or the accessory unit is owner occupied. Number 11, at each transfer of ownership of the property, a new affidavit that the owner resides on the property shall be provided to the planning board within 7 days of the closing of the sale of the house. Number 12, this special permit shall terminate if the use is not in accordance with this decision and its conditions.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
You won this battle, now go fight with the water department.
Now, let's say that that she has to change the meter over, which I can't see why that would be an issue. Is there a time frame?
For,
In other words, if, let's say within the month, they say that the water department says that she needs to change over the service. Does she have a month, a year, 6 months? Is there a certain time frame in order to recover to come up with the funds to do so?
I don't know.
You don't have
No
to
idea.
tell the water department.
Unfortunately.
I mean, that's a big cost to put a water meter in.
You need
I
to talk
frankly
about
don't
the
think
department
it
about it.
needs a
I
new water
wouldn't
meter,
think
that's
that-
my
I
opinion,
wouldn't
but,
think that's
Right.
gonna happen.
It's something new to me.
well, if you get the answer to that, come back here and tell us what it is.
It's probably, you're on TV, by the way, did you know that?
Well, I know.
Hey, Paul, your accessory dwellings, have you had to put in separate water?
Pardon?
I said on the accessory dwellings that you've done recently, have you had to put in separate water meters?
I couldn't hear you, Bill.
Well, the question doesn't change when you get closer. I said, on the accessory dwellings that you've done recently, have you had to put in a separate water meter?
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
Well, what were the conditions though? I mean, was it?
Detached?
Oh, no, they did require a separate water meter from the unit, because the unit is separate from the main house.
Oh,
Oh,
that's different.
But attached, an attached accessory dwelling, have you done this?
Yes, we did
Did
one
they
up on
need-
Vinyl Road.
Did they need a new water meter there? Is that right?
Yeah, what they did was to come up, there was one water service coming in from the street,
Mm-hmm.
so halfway between the street and the house, they went in there, they just spliced the line and they ran a separate line, the accessory line, and put a meter on the outside of the house.
Interesting.
Well, see
Well,
what
you have to talk to water department.
Well, I mean, there is the access, it's still part of the main dwelling. I know it is an apartment, it's there for her mom, but the access to it's still accessing the inside of the house.
I don't think we're gonna be able to resolve it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're not.
Well, we'll find out.
You should
Yeah,
know
I'd like
about
to know
it.
the answer to that.
We'll find out from the water department what she needs to do. She wants to do everything right.
Yeah.
And you can always appeal it to the water commissioners,
Yeah.
and that's the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
Okay,
great.
Thank you very
Well,
much.
As far as we're concerned,
There's a
go for it.
20-day appeal period, so we'll file this decision just as soon as we can, probably Monday or Tuesday, and then 20 days from that is an appeal period. I don't know how the building commissioner is gonna deal with that, maybe.
Okay.
I think we've issued a foundation permit at least at this point, so the idea was to get the foundation in before the weather closed out, and I
Okay.
think that's gonna happen, so. That's,
See a lot of
that's
objection
the
here.
main stumbling
Yeah,
block.
no, that's true.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Good luck.
You Edward Foster? Paul? You Edward Foster?
Yeah, the A&R, yeah,
What do you gotta do?
across the road.
Tell us what you're doing.
The applicant Ryan Whitney purchased a house, and he purchased the land between the house and the ocean and the harbor. That was registered land, there was a notification was planned on, went to the land court. It also showed, it's on this plan, this parcel C1 and C2, which is the actual beach land court will only decree to the high water, which is a sign here. So he just acquired the deed from the estate of Joe Rulon and Martha Frazier to pick up this parcel here. And when we got the deed, we did an 81X plan and recorded that in the registry. And this part here is to divide that parcel C, or the beach parcel we refer to. Half of it's going to go with this house, and the other half will go with this lot right here.
Oh, so is this the new division? The current parcel is this big?
Yeah, this plan just.
Okay, so you're cutting this parcel here.
Yes, the beach parcel.
Okay.
This is a new property.
All this
line,
exists
Paul,
then?
and-
Oh, this other
And
stuff?
these two property lines get abolished.
You're
No,
Xing out
technically, they
there?
don't get abolished. This is,
They'll keep the
parcel
board.
6 and 7 is registered land.
Oh, I
This is
see, okay.
unregistered.
Okay. So this little zigzag I see through there?
Right, that's where the Z lines are.
But these are existing parcels, 6 and
Yes.
7.
Yeah, there's a note, there's 6, 7, and
A and B.
are just shown for, just so someone can look at this plan and see what he actually owns.
The only thing you're adjusting is this here.
This is here.
Okay.
Just taking parcel.
I'm just curious as to if they haven't been
We're gonna join
combined,
this one with 6,
could they
this
be,
one with 7.
at some point in the future,
So this,
different
these don't
ownership?
become
I don't know why that would
developable
ever happen.
parcels.
Yeah.
No, that's a beach.
Right, but this would.
Oh, that's actually beach?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is going out to low water,
Low water.
and this is the high water. The land court only decrees the high water, so if
Right.
you own this, then you never going on unregistered section. What happened was, when they conveyed this to the applicant, they forgot to prepare a deed for the unregistered land. So they finally acquired that.
You got a motion for us, Laura?
Okay.
Save these, not for the side, on the side of the bar.
I move to endorse as approved under the subdivision control law not required, a plan of land in the town of Scituate, Massachusetts, located at 179 Edward Foster Road, prepared by Ross Engineering Company Incorporated for Ryan D. Whitney, dated December 4th, 2014, as the division of the tract of land shown is not a subdivision because it shows a proposed conveyance or change in lot line which does not alter the existing frontage as required under the Scituate zoning bylaw.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Go to bed.
Do we have minutes?
Rick, yeah, we have a couple of them.
We got bills?
Interesting, you looked at 900 square feet then,
Oh, in Hingham?
In Hingham, yeah.
That's what they do.
whichever is less.
I think they were partly imitating you where you were thinking about going.
The herd is following.
Yeah.
I move that we approve the Scituate Planning Board minutes for November 6th, 2014, and the Scituate Planning Board minutes for November 25th, 2014.
Have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
For those that I was present.
That's Laura. I'll be in, I'll sign it tomorrow.
Just a second, let me sign these real quickly and get them back. Okay, raise those bills. Oh, only one. Okay, I move that we approve $46.99 to who but W.B. Mason for the requisition submitted, for office supplies.
More paper.
Second.
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We should just approve like $1,000 and work off that for a while. I mean, we're doing them $50 at a time.
Could take 10 years.
A lot of paper clips.
One that gets me is the typewriter repair.
I know.
You know, my mom just got a new computer, and it's funny because she bought a new keyboard for it, but she called it a typewriter. So she's like, I'm having trouble with this typewriter.
3 signatures.
Yeah.
All right, signatures, all set.
Liaison reports? Hearing none. Is that Bob's motion?
Oh, I did.
What
Oh,
about,
wait a minute.
what about water issues? Everything's
Water issues?
sort of resolved with the, I mean, all of the things that went back and forth about Benjamin Steadley and
Yeah, it looked like a massive
Blanchard Farm.
lake over there.
Yeah, there were massive amounts of water in both. Blanchard Farm, the woman whose house was getting completely inundated, got the water kind of
Moved
diverted
around.
around her house, and she is, I think she's gonna make out fine because they're adding some more diversionary trenches up on top of, at Blanchard Farm. They're also putting in a plug in the detention basin, which for some reason wasn't in when the rain came down and everything just
That wasn't
went through.
detaining anything, it was just flowing
Wasn't
through.
detaining
That makes a big
anything.
difference.
Huge.
So that I think is on its way to really being solved. The other one that they have to come up with some more places to put some additional storage for stormwater, because there's nowhere to put it in the basins that they have, in the temporary basins that they
Is
have.
this Denver?
So this is
Blanchard.
Studley.
Oh, that was, oh, Studley, okay.
Flat
Studley.
124.
This is in the
214.
temporary or the permanent basins?
The temporary ones,
The temporary ones.
just for construction.
Yeah,
But
because if I remember right, the permanent ones were oversized, right?
Yep.
That's what
they
they said.
look plenty big.
Yeah.
Nothing was anywhere near the top.
Uh-huh.
So,
I received several comments about how nice that entryway looks going into 124.
Into 214 with the
214,
stone
yeah.
and.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did a
Yeah,
nice
that's
job.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Good. I have the final version of the budget, if you guys would like one. 6.
I know we had some changes. Is that the one that was sent out electronically already?
It was, a couple things did get knocked back.
Okay, no, that's,
As far as training for the board members, that used to be in our budget. Now that's going to be something that if you do want training, it's going to have to go through the town administrator's budget. The coastal resource officer is also included in our budget because of the way the FEMA grants are paying for a portion of her salary. So you will see her in there.
That was in the other version too. You had that before, right?
Yeah, that's not.
Yeah.
It's
But her budget is
50%,
all
right?
fleshed out, and you've got her goals and objectives and all the things that she's gonna be doing.
So what other changes were made? You said there were a few
Mileage
changes.
was cut back a little bit,
Yeah.
and office
Do we have to
supplies
rescind the
is-
paperclip approval?
Maybe.
Save your paper.
yeah.
So-
Save
so
them up
that's
for the next
that.
6 months.
And the only other thing I was gonna ask is if the planning board would be interested in writing a letter of support for a grant application to MAPC for money for the hazard mitigation plan, which we absolutely have to have in place to get any money from FEMA.
I'd be delighted to write a letter.
Great.
No,
Love it.
strike that. I'd be delighted to sign a letter.
Okay, that sounded more
Need a
like
draft of a letter.
Great,
You draft it, I'll sign it.
okay, good.
Now I'm ready, Bob's motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do we have to put the chairs up?
No, they will do that. Someone of the facilities department will do that. Are we off camera?
You are now.